Elon Musk stood on the stage of the International Climate Summit, a global event that had gathered the world's most influential environmentalists, scientists, and world leaders. His reputation as a visionary entrepreneur preceded him. The audience hung on his every word as he outlined his vision for humanity's future: settling on Mars, becoming a multi-planetary species, and escaping the potential collapse of Earth. His bold ideas were met with thunderous applause. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Humanity must leave Earth, he said, his voice steady and resolute. Space is the next frontier. We need to colonize Mars. This planet is not going to last forever. Our best hope for survival is among the stars. As his speech ended, a wave of excitement filled the room. Investors, scientists, and politicians exchanged eager whispers, their imaginations set ablaze by Musk's future-focused vision. But then something unexpected happened. A young girl, no older than 16, stood up from the back of the room. She was dressed in simple clothes, jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers. Her eyes, sharp and intense, locked onto Musk. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she looked determined. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the crowd, drawing every gaze in the room. "I respectfully disagree." A hushed silence fell over the crowd. Musk blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the interruption. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure whether this was a stunt or a real challenge. The girl took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "The problem isn't that Earth can't be saved," she continued, her gaze never leaving Musk. "The problem is that we're looking in the wrong places for the answers. We don't need to leave Earth. We need to fix it." Musk's brow furrowed, but the curiosity in his eyes was unmistakable. "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism but intrigued. The young girl took a step forward, her confidence growing. "We have the technology to restore the planet. There are methods, scientific advancements, innovations that could reverse the damage we've done. We just need to use them." Musk leaned forward slightly, clearly not convinced but curious. "Restoring the planet? That's a nice thought, but Earth's problems are far more complicated than some technology fix. You can't just undo centuries of environmental neglect." The girl smiled, a small but confident smile. "It's not about undoing everything in an instant. It's about creating a sustainable future, a future where humanity and the Earth can thrive together. The planet isn't beyond saving, but we need a radical new approach, one that isn't obsessed with leaving Earth but focused on healing it." The room was silent. The tension between the two, Musk's spacebound vision and the girl's earthbound idealism, was palpable. A few murmurs began circulating in the crowd. The girl was either a visionary, a fool, or something in between. But one thing was clear: she wasn't backing down. Musk's eyes glinted with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "I'll be honest," he said, standing up from his chair. "I've heard a lot of grand ideas, but none of them come close to the scale of what's needed to save this planet. It's going to take more than just hope and good intentions." The girl's gaze never wavered. "You're right. It's going to take action, but it's possible. You just have to be willing to believe in something different." The crowd watched, waiting for Musk's response. For a moment, it seemed like the debate would end there. But Musk, always the provocateur, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Well, I'm curious to see what you've got," he said, his voice dripping with both challenge and amusement. "Show me. Prove it." A few seconds passed before the girl finally spoke, her voice calm but full of conviction. "I will. And when I do, you'll realize that the future of humanity doesn't depend on leaving Earth. It depends on fixing it." The audience, now hooked, leaned in as Musk nodded slowly, his interest peaked. The moment was electric, a face-off between two radically different visions for the future, one that reached for the stars, and one that aimed to save the very ground beneath their feet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The words flashed on the screen as the camera zoomed in on the girl, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. The world had just witnessed the beginning of something bigger than they could imagine. Maya Carter wasn't always a genius, though the world was starting to think of her that way. She hadn't been born with a silver spoon or surrounded by a world of luxury. No, her story began in a small, weather-beaten house in the sleepy town of Cascade Locks, Oregon, a place known more for its misty forests and wild rivers than for producing prodigies. Her mother, Dr. Helen Carter, was an environmental scientist who spent her life studying ecosystems, climate change, and the impact of human industry on the natural world. Maya had grown up in the lab, surrounded by stacks of research papers, test tubes, and scientific equipment. There was always a hum of activity in the house, a buzz of ideas that made the air feel alive with possibility. But it was also a house filled with questions, unanswered ones. Helen Carter was a fierce protector of the planet, and she raised Maya with the same passion. As a child, Maya often helped her mother with field studies, whether that was tracking the migratory patterns of birds or studying the health of local rivers. But it was during one of those summer expeditions, when Maya was just 10 years old, that she first saw the signs of Earth's rapid decline. A once thriving salmon population had dwindled down to near nothing. Streams that were once teeming with life had grown barren. One night, after one such trip, Maya sat in the kitchen, holding her mother's hand. Her mother was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the distant mountains, her mind far away. Finally, Maya spoke. "Mom, why don't we just fix it? All of it?" Her mother's eyes softened, and she turned to her daughter. "What do you mean, honey? Why don't we just make the earth better? All of the things that are broken. The oceans, the air, the forests." Maya trailed off, but she already knew what her mother would say. "It's not that simple, sweetheart," her mother replied, gently brushing a lock of Maya's hair out of her face. "The damage is deep. Sometimes it feels like we're too late, but we have to try. Every little bit we do counts." Maya wasn't satisfied with that answer. At that moment, she made a silent vow that she would figure out how to fix it, how to save the planet for herself and future generations. Little did she know, that promise would become the driving force of her entire life. When Maya turned 13, her mother passed away unexpectedly from a sudden illness. Her death was a cruel blow, leaving Maya to navigate the world without her guiding presence. It also marked the beginning of a period of isolation, where Maya threw herself into her studies even more. Schoolwork wasn't just a distraction. It became her lifeline. She consumed books, research papers, and documentaries as though they were food, and her love for science became all-consuming. It was during these years that Maya started to think in ways no one around her could understand. She built her first invention at 14, a prototype for a bioremediation system designed to clean toxic water sources by using genetically engineered algae. By 16, she had already developed several breakthrough ideas for renewable energy generation and waste management. But none of it felt like enough. Not yet. Maya never wanted to be the next child prodigy or the subject of some media frenzy. But when a few of her innovations caught the eye of a few top universities and environmental think tanks, the calls started coming in. By the time she was 16, Maya had given talks at climate change conferences around the world, but the recognition never brought her the peace she craved. What she needed wasn't applause. It was a partner. Someone who could take her ideas and amplify them to the global scale she knew was necessary. That's when she began to think about Elon Musk. She had read everything about him: the SpaceX missions, the Tesla electric vehicles, his Mars colonization plans. On the surface, Musk's interests in space exploration and renewable energy seemed at odds with her own focus on Earth's immediate needs. But deep down, Maya sensed something more. Musk was a man driven by bold ideas, not just for the future, but for the survival of the species. Maybe he was the person who could help her bring her vision to life. The more she thought about it, the more it made sense. If anyone could help her scale her technology and push it into the mainstream, it was Musk. But she would have to convince him, and that would be no easy task. In the meantime, Maya continued to refine her theories, working tirelessly with a small team of like-minded scientists she had recruited online. They were building prototypes for a new kind of green technology, something that combined bioengineering, nanotechnology, and energy systems in ways that hadn't been done before. Despite her growing success, Maya's path was not an easy one. She was constantly challenged by the limits of her youth. Many of her peers dismissed her ideas as the ramblings of an idealistic teenager. And even when her technology began to show promise, she was often met with skepticism from the adult world. But Maya had long ago learned to ignore the doubters. She had her own path to walk, one paved with the lessons of her mother's work and the promise she had made to herself. Now, standing before Elon Musk at the climate summit, Maya could feel that promise burning within her. She had the answer, or at least the beginning of it. And Musk, he was the key. If she could just get him to listen. As she looked at him now, seated across from her in front of hundreds of people, Maya didn't feel fear. She felt something else, something stronger. This was her chance. The moment her mother's work, her own research, and her vision for the future had all been leading up to. She wasn't just some teenager with a dream anymore. She was ready to make it happen. And with that, the battle lines were drawn. The quiet hum of anticipation filled the air after the climactic exchange between Elon Musk and Maya. The audience was still buzzing with the shock of witnessing a teenager boldly challenge one of the world's most influential entrepreneurs. But Maya wasn't thinking about the crowd. She wasn't even thinking about the global stage she had just stepped onto. All she could think about was Musk's response. "I'll be honest," Musk had said. "I'm curious to see what you've got. Show me. Prove it." Those words echoed in Maya's mind as she left the stage. For the first time, the weight of what she was about to attempt truly sank in. Prove it. She had spent years working on her ideas, perfecting the technology that could revolutionize Earth's future. But now, she wasn't just presenting it to a room of academics and environmentalists. She was up against a billionaire with a track record of pulling off the impossible. Musk wasn't just any investor. He was a disruptor, a visionary who changed industries with the flick of a switch. Could her ideas stand up to his? As she walked through the backstage area, a team of reporters approached her with questions. Maya politely declined, but her mind was racing. She could feel the eyes of the world on her. This was no longer just a small-scale tech proposal. It had the potential to change the course of human history. If she could convince Musk, convince the world, that saving Earth was more important than escaping it, then maybe, just maybe, there was hope for the future. Back in his VIP area, Musk sat across from his team, the gears in his mind already turning. His eyes were still on the screen where Maya had stood moments before, her challenge lingering in the air. He wasn't the type of man to back down from a challenge, especially one delivered with such fire and confidence. Yet, part of him was skeptical. Space was his realm. The stars were his goal. Mars was the answer. The planet wasn't going to be saved by some teen's tech breakthrough. Or was it? "I want to meet her," Musk said suddenly, snapping his fingers. His right-hand man, David, a seasoned SpaceX executive, looked up from the notes he had been taking. "You mean the girl who just told you that we're looking in the wrong places for solutions?" Musk leaned back, folding his hands. "Yes, she's got guts. I respect that. Plus, there's something in her eyes. I can't quite place it, but it's compelling. Set up a meeting. I need to see if her technology is the real deal or just a bunch of idealistic fluff." David nodded, pulling out his phone to arrange the meeting. Musk stared out of the window, deep in thought. Could she really be onto something? The next morning, Maya arrived at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. She'd flown in on a private jet, courtesy of a sponsorship from a prominent environmental think tank that was eager to see where this strange alliance could go. Maya had to admit, the idea of sitting down with Elon Musk was a surreal one. It felt like something out of a sci-fi novel, a teenager from a small town meeting one of the most powerful men on the planet. Her heart raced as she entered the futuristic-looking building. Musk's reputation preceded him. He didn't mince words or entertain distractions. If she was going to make her case, it had to be now. A team of engineers and scientists ushered her into a sleek conference room where Musk was already waiting. He stood up as she entered, his piercing eyes scanning her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Maya Carter," he said, offering a handshake. "I've been reading about your work. You've got some bold ideas." "Thank you, Mr. Musk," Maya replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I appreciate the opportunity." Musk gestured toward the seat across from him. "Please, take a seat." Let's get down to it. You've got a proposal that could change the future of this planet. I'm listening. Show me what you've got. Maya set a tablet down on the table and began to outline her plan, speaking with the kind of confidence that came from years of obsession with the problem at hand. The technology she had developed was a fusion of bioengineering, nanotechnology, and clean energy. It used genetically engineered organisms to absorb CO2 directly from the atmosphere and convert it into useful compounds, while also rejuvenating the soil and water supplies. She called it EcoVision, a system capable of reversing deforestation, cleaning polluted water, and revitalizing the Earth's ecosystems. You want to solve global warming with algae? Musk interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Maya nodded. Not just algae. This system is capable of working with multiple species of microorganisms and genetically engineered plants that can repair ecosystems on a molecular level. We can turn dead land into fertile soil. We can clean oceans that are dying from plastic pollution. We can remove the toxins from our atmosphere and stabilize ecosystems, restoring balance to the environment. All of this is achievable with the right application of existing technology. Musk leaned forward, folding his hands. I don't doubt the science, but you're talking about scaling it, turning a lab prototype into something that can be deployed globally. That's where most of these ideas fail. What makes you think you can pull it off? Maya's gaze never wavered. I've already started small-scale trials. In my hometown of Cascade Locks, I implemented a localized version of EcoVision on the banks of the Columbia River. We've seen a 40% reduction in pollutants and a revival of local wildlife in less than a year. Musk's eyes sharpened. I've heard about the river project, but small scale is nothing compared to the scope we need. We're talking about the entire planet here. I know, Maya said, but the potential is there. I can show you the data, Mr. Musk. If you're willing to trust me and fund the next phase of development, we can prove that this works on a larger scale. Musk was silent for a moment, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. The tension in the room was palpable. Maya felt every second stretch into eternity. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. Finally, Musk spoke. I'm intrigued, but I'm not interested in playing it safe. If we're doing this, we're going all in. No half measures. You get one shot, Maya. Maya's heart skipped a beat. I understand. Good, Musk said, standing up and extending his hand. Let's do it. But know this, if you fail, it won't just be your reputation on the line. It'll be the future of this planet. Maya's hand met his, her resolve solidifying in that moment. She wasn't just a teenager with a dream anymore. She was a force, and this was the beginning of something huge. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind for Maya. The quiet girl from Cascade Locks had suddenly been thrust into the global spotlight. The partnership with Elon Musk was a dream come true, but also the beginning of a battle she hadn't fully anticipated. Every step forward was met with an avalanche of challenges, technical hurdles, corporate politics, and public skepticism. But Maya wasn't one to back down. After her meeting at SpaceX, Maya had worked around the clock, fine-tuning her proposal for EcoVision. Elon Musk had given her a clear mandate. Go big, or don't go at all. There would be no half measures. No small-scale trials this time. EcoVision needed to be proven on a global scale, or the world wouldn't believe in it. Musk had arranged for her to meet with some of the top engineers and scientists from Tesla, SpaceX, and the Boring Company, a conglomerate of brilliant minds all at the cutting edge of technological innovation. Maya found herself in a sleek, white-walled conference room, surrounded by some of the smartest people she'd ever met. They were there to help her, but it felt more like they were waiting to poke holes in her plan than to support her. All right, Maya, said Dr. Julia Preston, one of Musk's top environmental engineers. We've read through your data. Your small-scale results are impressive, but you need to convince us how EcoVision can be scaled to a level that could really make a difference. How can it operate in diverse ecosystems around the world? Can it thrive in different climates? Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady the nerves that were threatening to rise. She had spent years crafting every detail of EcoVision, but now, with Musk's team scrutinizing her work, the pressure was intense. She wasn't just pitching a product or a concept anymore. This was the future of Earth. The planet's survival was riding on her success. First, let's start with the basic principle of EcoVision, she began, setting up a holographic display that filled the room with vivid images of landscapes, forests, rivers, oceans, showing the effects of pollution and climate change. As you can see, the problem isn't just the pollutants in the air or the oceans, Maya continued. It's the systemic damage that's been done to ecosystems over decades. EcoVision is designed to restore those systems from the ground up, using genetically engineered organisms that can neutralize toxins, regenerate soil, and even filter the air. This isn't just about cleaning up. It's about rebalancing entire ecosystems and giving them the tools they need to thrive again. She pointed to the image of a river that had been transformed into a thriving ecosystem, with wildlife returning and the water running clear again. The beauty of EcoVision is its adaptability. These microorganisms can be deployed in different environments, whether it's the arid deserts of the Middle East or the polluted waters of Southeast Asia. We tailor the species used in each region to local conditions, ensuring that the impact is maximized. Musk, sitting at the head of the table, leaned forward. How long will it take to see real change? I need results, Maya. We're not here to wait around for decades to see if this works. Maya nodded, acknowledging the weight of his words. The initial deployment phase will take about 2 years to show significant ecosystem recovery in select areas, but the first signs of progress can be seen within 6 months. We'll start small, focusing on key regions where the effects of climate change are most devastating. Areas like the Amazon rainforest, the Arctic, and the Great Barrier Reef. Once we prove EcoVision's capabilities on a localized level, we'll scale it globally. One of the Tesla engineers, Alex, raised his hand. And what about the cost? Even with your breakthrough technology, we're talking about a global project. What's the financial model? Maya had anticipated this question. She tapped a few buttons on her tablet, bringing up detailed cost projections and funding models. The initial funding will come from a coalition of private investors, including Musk's companies, she explained. After that, we will secure government funding and partnerships with international environmental organizations. The technology is scalable, so as we deploy it, the cost per unit will decrease, making it more affordable in the long term. In fact, if we begin rolling out EcoVision globally, it will generate its own revenue by restoring damaged lands and creating new, sustainable agricultural systems. Think of it like an investment in the earth, one that will pay dividends in the form of restored ecosystems and increased biodiversity. Musk was silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he processed the numbers. Maya could tell he was looking for any signs of weakness, any sign that this was another lofty idea that would never make it off the ground. Finally, he spoke. All right, Maya, I'm impressed by the concept, but there are still a lot of unknowns. You'll need to run larger-scale trials and prove that this technology can adapt to unpredictable environments. Plus, there's the issue of public perception. People aren't going to trust something just because we say it works. This will take time, and a lot of convincing. Maya took a steadying breath. I understand, Mr. Musk, but if we don't act now, there might not be a planet left to save. The room fell silent. It was the truth, unspoken but understood by everyone present. We're not going to wait around and see how bad things get, Maya continued. The longer we delay, the worse it will be. And that's not just for the environment. It's for every living creature on this planet, including us. Musk met her gaze, a flicker of something passing through his eyes. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was something deeper. Fine, he said after a long pause. We'll begin testing at a larger scale. But I want you to prove it. I want to see results. And we'll start with the Amazon. If you can bring back a piece of the rainforest, the rest of the world will listen. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of Musk's words. The Amazon was the lungs of the planet. If she could make a difference there, she could change the world. We'll make it happen, she said, her voice firm. And once it works, we'll prove to the world that it's possible to fix Earth. Not just survive here, but thrive. Musk stood up, extending his hand. I hope you're right, Maya. Let's see if you can change the course of history. Maya shook his hand, the fire of determination blazing in her chest. The battle for Earth had officially begun. The flight to Brazil felt surreal to Maya. As she sat in the plush seat of the private jet, looking out at the vast expanse of clouds below, her thoughts raced ahead. This was it, the critical first trial. If ecovision could work in the Amazon, it would prove to the world that restoring Earth's ecosystems wasn't just possible, but urgent. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Maya had spent weeks preparing for this moment, collaborating with environmental scientists, geneticists, and engineers from all over the globe. The Amazon rainforest, which once flourished as the planet's largest carbon sink, had been under siege for decades. Deforestation, illegal logging, and climate change had caused irreversible damage to vast swathes of the jungle. But with Musk's backing, Maya now had the resources to launch the first large-scale deployment of ecovision. As the jet descended over the green canopy of the rainforest, Maya felt a deep sense of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was no longer just about her technology, it was about saving an entire ecosystem, about preserving life on Earth. When the plane touched down in Manaus, Brazil, Maya was met by a team of local scientists, engineers, and field workers who had been preparing for months to make this trial a reality. There was an unmistakable tension in the air. The people here were passionate about their environment, but they were also wary of outsiders promising to fix things. Maya could see it in their eyes. They weren't convinced that an outsider, even with a bold new technology, could truly reverse the damage. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Renata Alvarez, the head of the local team, asked, her tone cautious. "The Amazon is complex. The ecosystem is delicate. You can't just throw in some microbes and hope for the best." Maya nodded, knowing the gravity of the situation. "I understand. That's why we're taking it step by step. We'll start small, testing the effect of ecovision on a section of the forest that's been heavily deforested. The microorganisms we're deploying have been tailored specifically for this environment. They can sequester carbon, regenerate the soil, and even help rebuild biodiversity. We'll monitor everything closely." Renata looked skeptical, but her expression softened slightly. "We'll see. I just hope you're right." Maya's heart pounded as they set off for the test site. The journey deep into the rainforest was long and arduous. They passed by clearing after clearing, some already lush with new vegetation, but others just barren. The ground a dry, cracked shell of what it once was. The contrast between the thriving parts of the forest and the destroyed ones was stark, almost painful. When they reached the site, Maya stood at the edge of what had once been a thriving section of the rainforest. It was now a wasteland, trees felled, roots uprooted, the soil eroded and barren. It felt like a symbol of everything the world had lost. The ecovision team immediately began setting up equipment, bringing in the genetically engineered microorganisms that would help kickstart the restoration process. Maya watched as the scientists distributed them into the soil, blending them with organic compounds that would help them thrive in this environment. The team planted the first round of seeds, a specially engineered strain of tree that could survive in the heavily altered soil. As the team worked, Maya felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, she felt like she might actually be doing something real. The day ended with the hum of machines, the rustle of workers clearing debris, and the steady rhythm of Maya's thoughts. The first stage was done, but this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, they would need to monitor and measure every detail: soil composition, carbon sequestration rates, signs of plant growth. For the first time, Maya allowed herself a brief moment of optimism. If this worked, it would prove to Musk, to the world, that ecovision could do what no one thought was possible. But even in her excitement, she couldn't shake the nagging worry in the back of her mind. What if it failed? What if the technology didn't take root, literally and figuratively? 1 month later, Maya found herself pacing in the field lab set up near the test site. The data from the first round of ecovision trials had just come in, and she couldn't help but feel a surge of anxiety. This was the critical moment. Would the microorganisms have made a difference? Would they have begun the slow, painstaking process of healing the damaged ecosystem? Renata approached, holding a clipboard filled with data. Her expression was neutral, but Maya could see the underlying tension. "We have some preliminary results," Renata said. "The microorganisms have started to make a difference. Carbon levels have decreased by around 15%, and soil quality has improved by nearly 10%. We're also seeing a slight increase in local vegetation growth." Maya's pulse quickened. What about biodiversity? Are there any signs of animals returning to the area? Renata hesitated. It's still early, but we've noticed some small wildlife, insects, and birds starting to come back. It's not a complete restoration, but it's a start. Maya allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. For the first time, there was tangible proof that ecovision worked. She couldn't let herself get too excited. This was only the beginning, but it was a critical first step. As the weeks went on, the signs of progress grew clearer. The soil became richer, the plants more resilient, and more wildlife began to return. The team was careful not to overstate the results. There were still many variables at play, but the preliminary data was undeniable. Ecovision was working. However, not everyone was convinced. Environmental groups had been following the trials closely, and while many were hopeful, others remained skeptical. There were murmurs about the risks of introducing engineered organisms into fragile ecosystems. What if something went wrong? What if the microorganisms spread too rapidly or affected species in unexpected ways? Maya couldn't ignore the doubts. The pressure to succeed was immense, but the pressure to be cautious was just as heavy. The world was watching, waiting to see if ecovision would live up to its promise. The day that Elon Musk arrived in Manaus marked a pivotal moment in the trial. Maya was both excited and nervous to show him the progress they had made. This was the man who had given her the chance, who had put his faith and his fortune behind her vision. She needed to prove that she could deliver. Musk, dressed casually in his signature black t-shirt and jeans, was as intense as ever, eyes scanning everything with a sharp focus. He wasted no time in asking the hard questions. So, Maya, how close are we to seeing full restoration? When will this thing go global? Maya took a breath. We're seeing significant progress, Mr. Musk. The initial trials have shown promising results, but there's still work to do. We need to scale up and refine the technology in real-world conditions before we can deploy it on a larger scale. Musk nodded, eyes narrowed. I need more than just promising results. If we're going to take this global, we need to show the world it works. And we need it fast. Maya met his gaze, knowing this was a make-or-break moment. I understand, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. The Amazon is only the first step. Once we perfect the system here, we can deploy it elsewhere. Musk stared at the test site for a long moment. The sound of birds chirping and the rustling of the forest seemed to fill the silence. Then he turned back to her, his expression hardening. Let's make sure you finish this marathon, Maya. The world doesn't have time for delays. Maya nodded, feeling the full weight of his words settle over her. This wasn't just about technology. It was about survival. The Amazon was only the beginning. The world was waiting, and Maya knew that ecovision was their last, best hope. The Amazon was transforming before Maya's eyes. In the months since the initial trial, ecovision had made noticeable strides in rejuvenating the soil and air. The carbon levels were steadily decreasing, and new plant life was beginning to sprout from once barren patches. There were still challenges to overcome. Moss and algae had started growing in unexpected places, and some species of plants were responding better than others. The team continued to monitor the results closely, and the pressure from Musk and the investors only grew as the months passed. But despite the successes, Maya couldn't shake the sense of unease that had taken root in her. The progress was encouraging, but it was still fragile. The complexity of ecosystems had never been more apparent to her. Every new discovery felt like a double-edged sword. Success was so close, but failure was lurking just around the corner. Maya found herself at the heart of the project more than ever. No longer the inexperienced teen with an untested dream, she had become the face of ecovision, fielding endless questions from environmentalists, governments, and investors. Her team worked tirelessly, and the collaboration between local scientists and her global network of researchers was proving effective. Yet there was still so much to do. The data they gathered showed positive results, but there were far too many variables for anyone to declare victory just yet. One afternoon, as Maya was reviewing the latest reports in the makeshift lab set up in Manaus, she received an unexpected call. It was from one of her closest advisors, Dr. Elias Turner, a biologist who had been working with her on the genetic engineering of the microorganisms. Maya, we've hit a snag, Elias said, his voice tense. There's been some unexpected behavior in the ecosystem. Some of the engineered plants are mutating faster than we anticipated. They're adapting in ways that we weren't prepared for. Maya's stomach dropped. What do you mean, mutating? It's difficult to say right now, but some plants are growing at an accelerated rate, while others are dying off. The microorganisms we introduced to regenerate the soil are spreading further than we expected, and in some areas, they're outpacing the natural growth of the local flora. Maya's mind raced. Are they harming the environment? We don't know yet. We're monitoring it closely, but this wasn't part of the plan. We can't just ignore it. She glanced out at the rainforest beyond the lab, her heart heavy. She had known the risks. Nature was unpredictable, but now it felt like she was walking a tightrope, and one wrong move could cause the whole thing to unravel. "I'll be there in an hour," Maya said, her voice steady despite the worry that gripped her chest. "We need to assess this immediately." By the time Maya arrived at the test site, the mood was tense. Elias and the rest of the scientific team were already there, taking samples from the area where the mutations had been observed. As Maya walked over to the team, Elias greeted her with a grim expression. "This is worse than we thought," Elias said, leading her to a patch of land where the mutated plants had begun to grow in bizarre, almost alien shapes. Some plants were twisting in unnatural directions, while others seemed to be spreading too rapidly, choking out other species in the process. Maya knelt beside one of the plants, inspecting it closely. The leaves were larger than they should be, their edges curling in on themselves. "How did this happen?" she murmured to herself. Elias shook his head. "We can't explain it yet, but the microorganisms we introduced to accelerate the regeneration of soil and absorb carbon might have caused these plants to overproduce. It's like the system's out of balance." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a small setback. It was a threat to the entire project. If the ecosystem was destabilizing in this way, it could have catastrophic consequences, not only for the Amazon but for the global application of ecovision. This wasn't just about saving the rainforest. It was about proving that her vision could work on a planetary scale. "We need to figure this out now," Maya said, standing up quickly. "We can't let this spiral out of control." Elias nodded, but Maya could tell he was just as uncertain as she was about how to fix this. As they moved through the site, Maya noticed that the anomalies were more widespread than they'd initially realized. Some areas seemed to be thriving in unexpected ways, but others had become barren or inhospitable for local wildlife. The unpredictable growth patterns of the plants and microorganisms were beginning to challenge their entire hypothesis. "We can't ignore this," Maya said firmly. "We need a controlled shutdown of the system in these affected areas. We can't risk the mutation spreading." As the hours passed, the team worked relentlessly, collecting data and trying to stabilize the affected areas. Maya knew she had to inform Musk. The stakes were too high for secrecy. That evening, she called him. "Mr. Musk, I need to update you on the situation," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Musk's voice was sharp on the other end. "Maya, I'm listening. We've encountered some unforeseen issues with the ecovision trial in the Amazon. There's been some genetic mutation in the plants we introduced. It's not necessarily a disaster, but we need to investigate further before we continue scaling up." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Musk spoke, his voice calm but firm. "How long before you can fix it?" Maya took a deep breath. "We're still assessing the damage, but we may need to halt the deployment temporarily in the affected zones. The last thing we want is for this to spread out of control. You have a team of the best scientists working on this. Do whatever it takes to fix it," Musk replied. "But remember, we're on the clock. The world is watching, Maya. And if this fails, it'll be more than just your reputation at stake." Maya swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't just about her, or even the project anymore. It was about the entire future of ecovision, and if it failed, the consequences would be global. "We're doing everything we can, Mr. Musk," she said, before hanging up. Maya's thoughts were consumed with the problem at hand. Her dream of saving the Earth was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't afford to make a misstep. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to reverse the effects of the mutations. They adjusted the formula, recalibrated the environmental variables, and put additional safeguards in place. But despite their best efforts, the results remained mixed. Some areas of the forest began to stabilize, but others showed signs of deepening instability. The delicate balance of the ecosystem was hanging by a thread, and Maya knew that one more misstep could bring everything crashing down. Elon Musk's words haunted her. Do whatever it takes to fix it, but the clock is ticking. The world was waiting, and Ecovision's future was on the line. The days blurred together. Maya had always prided herself on her ability to think clearly under pressure, but the situation in the Amazon was unlike anything she'd ever faced. Every hour felt like a race against time, every decision fraught with consequence. The mutations in the plants and microorganisms were continuing to spiral out of control, despite their best efforts to contain them. The Amazon, the very ecosystem she'd hoped to save, now felt like a battleground, her vision of hope now teetering dangerously on the edge of disaster. Maya sat at the makeshift command center, a small room filled with screens flashing data from the field. Elias was at her side, and together, they pored over the latest results. It was a jarring mix of good and bad. In some sections of the rainforest, the soil had started to recover, and new plant species were beginning to emerge. But in other sections, the mutated plants were spreading uncontrollably, and the altered microorganisms had begun to overwhelm the natural balance. These plants, they're not just growing faster, Elias said, his voice tense. They're evolving in ways that we didn't anticipate. They're adapting to their environment at an accelerated rate. Maya ran her fingers through her hair, feeling the weight of the situation settle deeper into her bones. Is it possible that the technology is simply too powerful? That it's outpacing nature's ability to cope? It's possible, Elias admitted, his eyes glued to the data streaming across the screen. The microorganisms we introduced were supposed to work in harmony with the local environment, but if they're spreading too fast, it could mean long-term instability. Maya sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. She'd known there were risks. Every groundbreaking technology came with its own dangers, but this was worse than she could have imagined. If Ecovision was to succeed, they would need to find a way to slow the growth of the microorganisms and the mutated plants. And fast. Meanwhile, in the United States, Elon Musk was growing impatient. Maya had kept him informed of the escalating situation in the Amazon, but the messages were growing shorter and less optimistic. Musk, ever the pragmatist, wasn't one to tolerate failure, especially when the stakes were as high as they were now. Maya had scheduled another video call with him, the pressure in the air almost palpable even through the screen. Maya, Musk's voice crackled through the speakers, his face a mask of determination. What's the status? I need a clear answer. Can this project be saved or not? Maya took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. The results are mixed, Mr. Musk. We've seen some positive effects, soil recovery, reduced carbon levels, but there's been an unexpected chain reaction in certain areas. Some of the plants and microorganisms are growing too fast, causing instability. Musk leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What does that mean, exactly? Are we talking about a failure here, or just a temporary setback? Both, Maya admitted, her voice steady but strained. It's a setback, but it's not an insurmountable one. We need more time to tweak the balance of the system. If we act quickly, we can still save it. Time is something we don't have, Maya, Musk replied, his voice colder than before. The world is watching. Every minute we waste is an opportunity for someone else to come up with a better solution. I'm not asking you for excuses. I'm asking you to fix it. Maya's throat tightened. The weight of Musk's expectations, combined with the global pressure, felt unbearable. I'm doing everything I can, she said softly, trying to keep the frustration from creeping into her voice. I need more time. We need to recalibrate, and then we can start the real testing again. If we push forward too quickly, we risk doing more harm than good. There was a long pause before Musk spoke again. I'm going to give you one more week, Maya. 1 week to get this under control. If you can't stabilize the project by then, I'll pull the plug. No more delays. No more excuses. Maya's heart sank as the call ended. She stared at the screen, the words echoing in her mind. 1 week. As the days ticked down, Maya found herself at a crossroads. She had no choice but to push forward, to find a way to stabilize the system and prove that Ecovision could work. But she also knew that time was running out, and with every decision she made, the stakes grew higher. Elias had continued working around the clock, consulting with her team of scientists to refine the technology and isolate the mutated plants. They'd implemented a new approach, one that involved halting the deployment of microorganisms in certain regions while they recalibrated the genetic algorithms controlling their growth. It was a risk, but it was the only option left. Here's the thing, Elias said as Maya sat across from him in their makeshift lab. We've isolated the mutations to 3 primary regions of the forest. The microorganisms in these areas are spreading faster than we can control them. But if we reverse the process, by essentially shutting down those microorganisms, we might be able to slow things down long enough for the rest of the ecosystem to stabilize. Maya furrowed her brow. So, you're suggesting we essentially cut off the project in the most affected areas and hope that the rest of the forest can recover on its own? Elias nodded. It's a gamble, but it's the best shot we have. Maya hesitated. If they stopped in the affected zones, it would send a message to the world that EcoVision wasn't ready, that it was still a prototype. It would set back the project by years, maybe even decades. But if they didn't act, the entire rainforest could be lost, and with it, their dream of restoring the Earth. There's no choice, Maya said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty. We do it. We shut it down in the affected zones and recalibrate. We can't risk going any further without doing this. Maya and her team worked tirelessly, implementing the new approach. The decision wasn't easy, and it felt like a massive setback. But the results were clear. Without immediate intervention, the mutations would continue to spread. As Maya stood in front of the test site, watching the team carry out the delicate work of shutting down the microorganisms, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was more than just a project. It was her vision, her legacy. If they succeeded, it could change the world. If they failed, it could be the end of everything. The next few days were a blur. The team worked around the clock to recalibrate the system, adjusting the parameters and monitoring the effects. The pressure to get it right was suffocating, but there was no turning back now. By the end of the week, Maya had the first signs of success. The mutated plants were beginning to slow their growth, and the microorganisms were no longer spreading uncontrollably. There was still a long way to go, but it was a victory in its own right. When Maya called Musk to update him on the progress, she felt a mixture of relief and dread. She didn't know if he would be satisfied with the results, but she had no choice but to hope. Maya, Musk's voice crackled through the phone. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You've bought us some time, but time is all you've got now. Show me what you can do with it. As Maya hung up the phone, she felt a rush of determination. The clock was ticking. She had just 7 days to turn the tide. EcoVision wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a race against the forces of nature and time itself. And Maya was ready to face whatever came next. The days after the intervention were a strange mix of cautious optimism and persistent anxiety. Maya stood at the edge of the forest with Elias, both of them staring at the altered landscape in front of them. The once unruly patches of mutated plants had started to recede, and the surrounding ecosystem appeared to be stabilizing. However, despite this tentative progress, the air was thick with tension. They had only won a small battle in a war that was far from over. How are the recalibrated zones holding up? Maya asked, her voice low but urgent. Elias glanced at his tablet, his fingers moving swiftly across the screen to review the data. Some zones are recovering faster than others. We've made significant progress, but there's still a long way to go. The microorganisms seem to be stabilizing, but we can't afford any setbacks. Maya nodded. We can't. Musk's deadline is in 3 days. If we don't show results, he'll pull the plug. We need to prove that EcoVision is more than just a promising idea. We need to make it work. The looming deadline was more than just a reminder of the pressure Maya felt. It was a constant, tangible weight on her shoulders. The thought of losing everything she'd worked for was unbearable. She'd poured years of her life into EcoVision, and now, with only 3 days left, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Her phone buzzed, and she didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. The moment she answered, Musk's voice was on the other end, crisp and businesslike. Maya, I'm getting reports from the investors. Musk's tone was sharp. I need to know. Can you guarantee the project will be ready for global scaling in 3 days? No more delays. Maya hesitated. Mr. Musk, we've made substantial progress, but there are still areas in the forest that need attention. We can stabilize the affected zones, but full-scale implementation? That's not something we can guarantee in 3 days. There was a brief silence, then Musk responded, his voice laced with impatience. I didn't ask for guarantees. I asked for results. You've spent too much time tweaking this. I need to see that it works, on a global scale, not just in isolated patches. I won't wait forever, Maya. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, the pressure now almost suffocating. I understand, but this is a complex system. Rushing it will only risk failure. If we're going to do this, we need to make sure the foundation is solid. You've got 3 days, Musk snapped before ending the call abruptly. Maya put the phone down, staring at the screen for a long time. 3 days. It felt like a death sentence. The pressure of it was overwhelming, but she couldn't afford to let herself break. Not now. She had to push forward, whatever it took. With 3 days remaining, Maya made a decision. It wasn't going to be enough to simply stabilize the zones in the Amazon. The project needed to show results on a global scale to convince Musk and the investors that ecovision could work. If she was going to save the planet, she had to go all in. I'm going to expand the experiment, Maya told Elias, her voice full of determination. We'll take the recalibrated zones and scale them up, test them in different environments. I need to prove this can work across the world's ecosystems. Elias looked at her, his eyes wary. Scaling up too fast could create new risks. The environment in each region is different. We can't predict what will happen if we rush. Maya shook her head, her jaw set. If we don't show Musk that this can work on a global scale, we'll lose everything. We don't have the luxury of caution anymore. Elias sighed, but he didn't argue. All right, but I'm going to need full access to the monitoring systems. This is a calculated risk, Maya. We'll need to keep a close eye on every data point. Maya nodded. I'll get the resources we need. We'll make it work. As the team worked around the clock to implement the global scaling test, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. If the global tests failed, it would mean the end of ecovision, and potentially, the end of her dream to save the Earth. She spent every waking moment in the lab, reviewing data, making adjustments, and coordinating with teams across the globe. Every few hours, she received updates from different regions: the deserts of Africa, the tundras of Siberia, the oceans surrounding the Pacific Islands. Each location posed its own unique challenges, and every test seemed to lead to more questions than answers. As the clock ticked down, the pressure reached unbearable levels. Maya found herself questioning everything. Had she been too ambitious? Too quick to push forward with a plan that, despite its potential, had its flaws? She had always been certain of the science, of the idea that ecovision could heal the planet. But now, with the world watching and Musk's ultimatum hanging over her head, doubts began to creep in. On the morning of the 3rd day, the final test results began rolling in. The team had implemented the recalibration measures in multiple regions, carefully monitoring the data for signs of success or failure. Maya and Elias stood side by side, staring at the screens as the numbers continued to flow in. We're seeing some positive signs in the African desert zone, Elias said, his voice tinged with hope. The microorganism growth has stabilized, and plant life is starting to show signs of recovery. Good, Maya replied, though her voice felt tight with anxiety. What about the other zones? Elias hesitated, scanning the screens again. The Arctic tundra is showing mixed results. Some areas are recovering, but others are still exhibiting abnormal plant growth. The Pacific Islands, they're still too unstable to call it a success. Maya's heart sank. The results weren't consistent, and time was running out. She knew Musk would demand perfection, and these results weren't going to cut it. Then, a notification flashed across the screen. A breakthrough. The Amazon, Maya's breath caught in her throat. Look at this. Elias leaned over, his eyes widening as he analyzed the data. It's stabilizing. The affected areas in the Amazon are showing signs of full recovery. The mutated plants have reverted to their natural state. Maya's pulse quickened. This was it. If the Amazon could recover, if they could stabilize the ecosystem there, the success of the entire project could be proven. We have one shot, Maya said, her voice firm now. If we can make it through today without any setbacks, I'll present the results to Musk. We might just have a chance. The final hours before the deadline were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Maya and her team monitored the results from the Amazon and the other global test sites, making last-minute adjustments. But even as the data rolled in, the tension didn't ease. By the time the final tests were complete, Maya had a set of results that she hoped would be enough. Not perfect, but far closer to success than they had any right to expect. She called Musk again, knowing that this would be the defining moment. The stakes couldn't be higher. Maya, Musk's voice came through the line, crisp as ever. What do you have for me? Maya took a deep breath. We've made significant progress. The Amazon is stabilizing. Some of the global test sites have shown recovery, though we're still fine-tuning a few regions. But I believe we're on the verge of something that could change the world. Musk was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone was different. You've got results. They're not perfect, but they're real. Keep going, Maya. You've earned another chance. As Maya hung up the phone, the weight of the last 3 days lifted slightly from her shoulders. They had a chance. EcoVision was still alive, and the dream of restoring the Earth could continue. But as she looked out over the rainforest from the command center, one thought echoed in her mind. This was just the beginning. The aftermath of the deadline was like a brief pause between storms. Maya sat alone in her office, the hum of the computer and the low murmur of the lab outside offering a strange sense of stillness. The pressure of the past few days had finally begun to ebb, but her heart still raced with uncertainty. The phone call with Musk had been a tentative victory, but it was clear that this was far from over. One success didn't guarantee that the future was secure. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the situation wash over her. The data from the global test sites had shown promising recovery in some regions, but there were still massive hurdles to overcome. The project wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but they had taken a critical first step. A knock on the door broke her concentration. Maya, you've got visitors, Elias said, stepping inside. His face was lined with fatigue, but there was something else in his eyes. Something lighter, like a small spark of hope. Maya sat up, blinking as she took in his expression. Visitors? Who? Some folks from the UN, Elias said. They've been following the project and want to talk about potential global collaborations. I think you'll want to hear what they have to say. Maya felt a rush of adrenaline. The UN? That meant political, financial, and environmental weight. Serious people who had the power to turn EcoVision into a worldwide movement. But it also meant more pressure, more eyes watching, more expectations, and more scrutiny. She stood up, smoothing down her shirt, trying to steady her breath. All right, let's see what they have to offer. The meeting room was large, modern, and stark. A polished table surrounded by representatives from the United Nations, along with a handful of advisors and environmentalists. The air was thick with anticipation as Maya entered the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She had just come off a high of barely surviving the final deadline, and now this? A meeting with some of the world's most powerful figures. A man in a dark suit, with a distinguished air, stood up as she entered. Dr. Maya Lin, thank you for taking the time to meet with us, he said. I'm Alexander Vance, representing the UN Environmental Council. This is Maria Hernandez, our Director of Sustainable Development. Maya shook their hands, giving them a nod of acknowledgement. Thank you for coming. I'm glad we could arrange this conversation. We've been following the progress of your project, EcoVision, Alexander said, his voice deliberate. The potential for your work to reverse decades of environmental damage is nothing short of extraordinary. The world needs solutions like this, and we believe this is a pivotal moment for both your project and for the future of the planet. Maya felt the weight of his words. They were heavy with possibility and with pressure. We've discussed your recent developments in the Amazon and other test regions, Maria said. And while the initial results are promising, there are concerns we need to address. Maya braced herself. She had been prepared for this. There were always concerns, always questions. But she couldn't afford to back down now. What concerns? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Maria hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. The global scaling you attempted, while necessary, raised alarms. The risks of pushing ecovision to such extremes without fully understanding the ecological balance could have unforeseen consequences. We're talking about the potential to affect entire ecosystems, some of which may never recover. Maya felt a twinge of frustration, but she held her ground. I understand the concerns, Maria, but that's why we've worked so hard to recalibrate. Ecovision was never meant to be a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about learning from nature, adjusting to the needs of each region. The potential for success is there. We've seen it in the Amazon. The ecosystem there is already stabilizing. That's true, Alexander replied, but the consequences of failure are just as vast. This is not a minor risk. This could have global repercussions. The scale of the technology, its rapid deployment, it's unprecedented. The world is watching, and we cannot afford to gamble with the Earth's future. Maya knew the gravity of what they were saying. I don't want to gamble. I want to save the planet. But this is the reality of innovation. We have to take risks. We have to push boundaries. And we need support, not just from the UN, but from governments, scientists, and corporations willing to invest in this future. The conversation continued for hours, with Maya defending ecovision against the mounting concerns. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally draining. Each question felt like a challenge, and each answer seemed to fall short of assuaging the fears of the representatives. When the meeting finally ended, Maya walked back to her office, her mind spinning. She hadn't convinced them completely, but they hadn't dismissed her either. The battle wasn't over, but it was getting harder to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sitting at her desk, Maya closed her eyes, feeling a deep sense of fatigue. The pressure had never been higher, and the responsibility was suffocating. What if she had miscalculated? What if ecovision, despite all her hopes, was too ambitious? The possibility that her project could fail, and with it, the planet's hope for salvation, was a nightmare she couldn't fully process. She picked up her phone and dialed Elias. "Hey," she said, when he picked up. "You still at the lab?" "Yeah, just finishing up some data analysis," Elias replied, his voice tired but calm. "How'd it go?" Maya ran a hand through her hair. "It didn't go great. The UN wants more assurances. They're worried about the risk of global deployment. They think we might be pushing ecovision too far, too fast." Elias was quiet for a moment. "I figured they'd have concerns. It's only natural." Maya sighed. "Yeah, but it feels like the stakes keep getting higher. Musk wants results, the UN wants guarantees, and we're just trying to keep the whole thing from falling apart." "Listen," Elias said, his tone shifting slightly. "You've built something no one has ever attempted before. Maybe we don't have all the answers right now, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. The world's not going to change in a day, and neither is ecovision. But you've given it the best shot anyone could." Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her emotions. "What if it's not enough?" Elias's voice softened. "You've done more than anyone else. You've taken the risks, you've made the breakthroughs. You can't control everything, Maya, but you can keep pushing, and that's all any of us can do." Maya's throat tightened. "Thanks, Elias." After a long pause, Elias added, "Don't forget why you started this. To make the world a better place. And no matter what happens, that's something that matters." As Maya ended the call, a sense of clarity began to wash over her. She had been so focused on the weight of failure, on the mounting pressure, that she had lost sight of why she'd started this journey in the first place. To make the world better, to heal the earth. She stood up from her desk, looking out at the lush, recovering rainforest visible from the window of her office. The Amazon was just the beginning, and even if they were facing enormous obstacles, it wasn't the end. Not yet. Maya was ready to fight for the future, whatever it took. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks after the UN meeting passed in a blur. Maya barely slept, working tirelessly to address the concerns raised during the discussion. Each day felt like a battle, one where she had to not only keep ecovision alive, but also try to make sure it would be scalable across diverse ecosystems. Every conversation seemed to carry more weight, more urgency. Every decision felt like it could tip the balance between success and catastrophic failure. But it wasn't just the external pressure that weighed on her. It was the creeping sense of doubt that began to settle within her. Even as the project showed promising results in some regions, there were growing signs of imbalance in others. The recalibrated ecosystems in the African deserts, for example, showed some impressive progress, but areas of plant life were beginning to exhibit abnormal growth patterns, patterns that had not been seen before. Maya sat at her desk late one night, staring at the data with a deep sense of unease. Despite all the breakthroughs, something still felt off. It was as if the more she tweaked the system, the more unpredictable it became. Elias entered the lab, his eyes bleary from a long day. He had been working late as well, analyzing the patterns and trying to identify the root causes of the irregularities. "Maya, we need to talk," he said, his voice tense. "I've been running simulations all night, and I think we're missing something crucial, something that's not showing up in our initial models." Maya leaned forward, setting down the data tablet in front of her. "What do you mean?" "There's an undercurrent of imbalance in the soil microbiome," Elias explained. "We've seen it before, subtle shifts in microbial activity that can cause disruptions down the line. I think we're seeing an accelerated version of it in the African desert zones. And if we don't address this soon, we could lose everything." Maya felt her chest tighten. "So, the whole thing could go south?" "I don't know yet, but it's a risk we can't ignore. The microorganisms we've been using to recalibrate the environment may not be stable enough in all regions. It's more complex than we thought." Maya stared at the data for a long time, her mind racing. She knew they were walking on the edge of a cliff. Ecovision had the potential to change the world, but they were on the verge of discovering that they might have miscalculated something crucial, something that could cause irreversible damage. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Musk. "Dr. Lin," Musk's voice came through the line with its usual urgency. "I've been reviewing the latest reports. I'm hearing about some instability in your zones. You know what that means?" Maya's stomach sank. She had been expecting this call, but hearing it made her pulse spike. "Mr. Musk, we're actively working on addressing it. There's an issue with the soil microbiome that we didn't anticipate, but we're on it. It's a manageable situation." "You've been saying that for weeks now," Musk's voice tightened. "I need results. The investors are getting restless. I don't care about your issues with microbial activity or unforeseen factors. What I care about is whether you're going to deliver on the global scaling or not." Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm the growing panic in her chest. "We're not abandoning this, Mr. Musk. We are figuring this out. But we need time. This is too big to rush." "Time? You've had time. I'm not waiting around while you iron out every wrinkle. You've got 48 hours to prove this is still viable, or I'll pull the plug." The line went silent for a moment, and Maya could feel the weight of his words sinking in. She had worked too long and too hard to let it slip through her fingers now. But the pressure was suffocating. "Understood," she finally replied, her voice steady, though her mind was anything but calm. "We'll make it work." The call ended, and Maya set the phone down, her hands trembling. 48 hours. They had 2 days to stabilize the project, to prove its viability to Musk, to the UN, to the world. It was a do-or-die moment, and everything hung in the balance. As Maya worked tirelessly with her team to identify a solution, the stress began to take a toll. Long hours in the lab and in front of screens, constant communication with global teams. Everything was escalating. But despite all the effort, the data continued to show the same worrying patterns. Certain areas were deteriorating faster than others. The recalibration efforts weren't sticking. By the time they were just hours from Musk's deadline, Maya was exhausted. There had been no breakthroughs, only dead ends. Her mind felt like it was on the verge of a breakdown. "Elias, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Maya confessed one night, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "We've tried everything. The recalibration methods aren't holding. Every region we stabilize seems to undo itself the moment we leave it." Elias, just as tired, rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation clearly affecting him too. "I don't know what else we can do. We've pushed the boundaries of what we know. If we can't get it right now, we're looking at a collapse. Musk won't care about the science behind it. He just wants results. If we don't have something concrete in 48 hours, it'll be over." The uncertainty clawed at Maya, but something inside her refused to give in. She couldn't let this be the end. Not after everything they had sacrificed. There had to be an answer. "I'll keep going," Maya said, standing up from her desk, determination setting in her eyes. "We're not done yet." That night, Maya called a meeting with her core team. They couldn't afford to keep trying the same approaches. They needed a breakthrough, a new way to stabilize the recalibrated ecosystems before Musk's deadline. "I've been thinking about the problem in a different way," Maya began, addressing the group. "We're so focused on microorganisms and soil that we've ignored the bigger picture, the plants themselves. What if we approach this like an ecosystem, not just a biological experiment? Maybe if we stabilize the entire ecosystem first, the rest will follow." Elias looked at her, still skeptical but intrigued. "You're suggesting we completely rework the entire framework? That's a massive shift. We'd need to redesign everything." "We've reached a point where it's either this or failure," Maya said. "What if we design a natural feedback loop where the plants themselves help regulate the balance of the microorganisms? We've been relying too heavily on outside variables." The room fell silent for a moment, and then the team slowly began to nod. "Let's try it," Elias said, after a long pause. "We don't have much to lose at this point." For the next 24 hours, Maya and her team worked around the clock, developing the new feedback loop system. It was risky, unproven, but it was their last shot. By the time the deadline loomed, they had set up the new experiment, embedding the plants into the soil in a way that would allow them to work symbiotically with the microorganisms. The hope was that this natural harmony would stabilize the environment in a way that their previous attempts couldn't. Maya didn't sleep. Instead, she stayed glued to the monitoring screens, tracking every data point as it came in. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. Finally, the numbers began to stabilize. The mutated plants in the African desert were starting to revert to their natural state. The Amazon rainforest showed marked improvement, and even the more temperamental Arctic tundra zones began to exhibit signs of ecological balance. "We did it," Elias breathed, staring at the screen in disbelief. Maya couldn't believe it either. After everything, they had done it. They had saved it. With only an hour to spare, Maya made the call to Musk. "Dr. Lin," Musk's voice came through, impatient as ever. "Where do we stand?" Maya swallowed hard. "We've stabilized the system, Mr. Musk. The feedback loop works. The ecosystems are holding steady, and the recalibration is on track." For a moment, there was silence. Then Musk's voice softened slightly. "All right, you've got my attention. Let's see what happens next." Maya set the phone down, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. They had done it. And, for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel the smallest spark of hope. But she knew this was only the beginning. There was still a long road ahead. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. EcoVision had passed the first major hurdle. Maya and her team had successfully stabilized the recalibrated ecosystems, and the project had gained a renewed sense of momentum. But as she had learned time and again, success wasn't permanent. There were still 1,000 ways things could go wrong. Maya stood on the balcony of her office, overlooking the sprawling research facility below. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the campus. The feeling of accomplishment from the past few days lingered, but it was already being replaced by an urgent need to push forward. There was no time to waste. The pressure from Musk had not abated. He had ordered them to move faster, to scale the technology globally as quickly as possible. The UN had asked for regular updates, and the media was starting to take notice, eager for more information. The world was watching now, and their every move was under scrutiny. "Hey, Maya," Elias called from behind her, breaking her reverie. "We've got a new set of data from the testing regions. It's looking promising, but there's something strange happening in the Amazon. It's subtle, but it's there." Maya turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean, strange?" "It's the wildlife," Elias explained, pulling up a tablet. "Some species are thriving, but others, they're disappearing. Not completely, but the numbers are dropping in certain areas. It's like some of the new plants are crowding out the native fauna. We're seeing a shift in the food chain." Maya frowned. This was a new wrinkle, one they hadn't accounted for. While the ecosystem was stabilizing, it was clear that the introduction of new species was creating an unexpected dynamic, one that might unravel everything they had worked for. "I need to see the data," Maya said, her voice tight. "Let's go." The next day, Maya and Elias flew to the Amazon, joining a team of environmental scientists and biologists on the ground. Their mission was clear: investigate the disappearing wildlife, assess the situation, and gather more data to determine whether they could adjust their plan. The world was watching them, and this moment, this journey, could make or break everything they had fought for. The Amazon was more than just a rainforest. It was the heart of the planet. Maya had always believed that Ecovision's success here would signal the project's potential to save the world. But now, standing in the thick, humid air of the forest, she couldn't shake the sense that they were venturing into uncharted territory. They trekked through the dense jungle, their boots sinking into the damp earth. The air was thick with the scent of wet leaves and decaying wood, the usual sounds of birds and insects amplified in the silence that surrounded them. Maya felt a cold twinge in her chest as they moved deeper into the jungle. This was a place that had been evolving for millions of years. They were tampering with something far older than they could comprehend. Over here, one of the local biologists, Anna, called. She was crouched next to a cluster of new plants, studying the ground beneath them. "You see these plants? They're crowding out the native species. The soil is changing, becoming too acidic in some areas, too rich in others. It's disrupting the food chain." Maya knelt down beside Anna, inspecting the plant life. It wasn't just the plants. She could see the signs of imbalance in the soil and surrounding vegetation. The microbial ecosystem Elias had warned her about was in flux. The rapid introduction of non-native species had shifted the balance in a way they hadn't fully anticipated. Elias stood beside her, frowning. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were hoping the feedback loop would maintain harmony. "I know," Maya muttered, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. "We'll fix this. We just need to adjust the models again. We'll find a solution." Anna shook her head. "Maya, I don't think it's that simple. You've already seen what's happening here. The plants are too aggressive. If you don't intervene soon, it's going to spread." Maya looked around, the enormity of the problem sinking in. It wasn't just about stabilizing ecosystems anymore. It was about maintaining biodiversity, keeping the complex web of life intact. If they weren't careful, they could undo decades of natural evolution, pushing the entire ecosystem to a point of no return. "Let's go back to the base," Maya said, her voice firm. "We need to rework the algorithms. I'm not leaving here until we get it right." Back at the research facility, Maya and Elias spent sleepless nights recalibrating the Ecovision model. They introduced new parameters into the system, more emphasis on biodiversity, better controls for invasive species, and a more gradual introduction of new plants and microorganisms. The changes were painstaking, requiring a combination of machine learning, ecological theory, and good old-fashioned trial and error. Every model they tested seemed to introduce new variables, some helpful, some destructive. Maya had hoped that the new adjustments would work, but as they analyzed the results, the problem only deepened. The Amazon wasn't just a test site. It was the proving ground for their entire vision. If they couldn't stabilize it, how could they expect the rest of the planet to follow? "Damn it," Maya shouted, slamming her fist on the table. "We've tried everything, and it's still not enough." Elias, who had been silently poring over the data, looked up. His eyes were tired, but there was still a spark of resolve in them. "Maybe we've been going about it the wrong way. We've been trying to force the planet to fit our model, instead of allowing nature to guide us. Maybe we need to listen to the Earth, not dictate its course." Maya stopped, her mind racing. What if Elias was right? What if the problem wasn't the technology, but their approach to it? The world wasn't just an equation to solve. It was a living, breathing entity that needed to evolve at its own pace. "Maya," Elias said, looking at her with a renewed sense of purpose, "what if we take a step back? We scale down, take a more localized approach. We learn from what the Earth is telling us. This isn't about saving the world in one giant leap. It's about learning how to nurture it, one step at a time." Maya looked at the data once more, her mind racing with possibilities. This was it. The new approach would require humility and patience, qualities they hadn't relied on before, but now seemed absolutely necessary. "We scale back," she said softly. "We start small again, listen more closely, and adapt faster." Ecovision was always about harmony. Maybe we've lost sight of that. Elias smiled. "It's a big shift, but it's the right one." Maya's eyes hardened with determination. "We'll fix this, and when we do, we'll be ready to change the world." Slowly, carefully, but with confidence. They spent the next several days refining their approach. The new models were far more flexible, allowing for localized ecosystems to develop and adapt to their own conditions rather than forcing a one-size-fits-all solution. The feedback loop was now tuned to respond to the natural growth patterns, not just the scientific ones. When they finally implemented the new adjustments in the Amazon, they waited with bated breath. Days passed, then weeks. But gradually, things began to stabilize. The wildlife returned, the plant growth became more harmonious, and the invasive species receded. The balance was slowly being restored. Maya stood in the lab one evening, looking at the latest results. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was a start. They had done it. They had found a way forward. As she turned to Elias, she smiled. "We're on the right path, but we've got a lot more work to do." He nodded, his eyes gleaming. "It's only the beginning." And for the first time in weeks, Maya felt a sense of hope. The journey was far from over, but they had learned something crucial. The Earth didn't need to be saved by force. It needed to be nurtured, listened to, and understood. And with that knowledge, they had the power to change the world, for real this time. The sense of relief that came after the stabilization in the Amazon was fleeting. As Maya and Elias began to see success in their localized approach, they were faced with a growing realization. Ecovision wasn't just about solving one crisis. It was about addressing every crisis that humankind had inflicted upon the planet, and there were many more lurking beneath the surface. Maya had been back in her office for a few days, catching up on communications with the UN and preparing for another round of progress reports when she received an unexpected call. It was a conference call with Musk and the board of investors. "Dr. Lin," Musk's voice came through, sounding more impatient than usual. "I've been hearing about your progress in the Amazon, but we've got another problem. A bigger one." Maya's stomach tightened. She could feel the tension on the other end of the line, the weight of expectation pressing on her chest. "What's going on?" "There are reports coming in from Antarctica and Siberia. New data we didn't expect. We're seeing large-scale environmental shifts happening in the ice caps, and it's starting to affect the global climate. We're talking about extreme weather patterns and rising ocean levels. Your model isn't factoring in these large-scale impacts." Maya felt a chill crawl up her spine. The ice caps were one of the most fragile ecosystems on the planet. If they were destabilizing, the consequences would be catastrophic. "I know," Musk continued, his tone taking on a more severe edge. "I need you to rework the entire model again, and I need it done fast. The window for action is closing, and we're looking at irreversible damage. If this thing unravels, we'll lose everything." "You'll lose everything?" Maya's mind raced. It felt like the walls were closing in. She had thought they were finally on track. They had adjusted their models, fine-tuned their feedback loops, and now they had to go back to square one. They were about to face the most daunting challenge of all, the threat of global collapse. "I'll get on it," Maya replied, though she knew the enormity of what Musk was asking was almost impossible. "But this is going to take time. We can't rush this." "You don't have time," Musk snapped. "You're already running out of it." The call ended abruptly, leaving Maya feeling isolated in her office. The weight of Musk's words felt suffocating. She had worked so hard to get this far, only to be told they were still on the edge of failure. The thought of everything unraveling was more than she could bear. The pressure was mounting, and it felt as if the entire world was expecting her to be the one to save it. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The thought of the ice caps shifting, of uncontrollable natural disasters cascading around the globe, haunted her. The consequences of failure had never been clearer. Her vision, her dream of ecovision, was on the line. And the stakes weren't just global anymore. They were deeply personal. She sat at her desk, running simulations and recalculating everything she thought she understood. Hours passed, But the numbers remained stubbornly grim. The data wasn't adding up. Then, as the first light of dawn crept through her window, something clicked. She'd been looking at the wrong approach all along. Instead of just trying to stabilize ecosystems on the surface, maybe they needed to focus on restoring the foundation, what was beneath the ice, in the soil, and in the oceans themselves. The true source of balance wasn't just in the air or above the ground. It was in the unseen, hidden forces that needed to be restored first. Her hand hovered over the keyboard, her fingers trembling as she typed out a new set of parameters. They would need to reintroduce natural cycles to the oceans, to the frozen tundras, to the very core of the Earth's biomes. Without that, nothing else would matter. The next morning, Maya gathered her team to share her new insight. There was a palpable tension in the room. After weeks of setbacks and uncertainty, they were all feeling the pressure, their nerves frayed and their patience worn thin. "This is a new direction," Maya began, her voice steady but with an underlying urgency. "I've been thinking, if we don't address the very foundation of these ecosystems, if we don't restore the balance below the surface, we won't be able to stabilize the environments on top. The oceans, the soil, the ice caps, we need to start there." Elias was the first to speak, his brow furrowed in thought. "It's a bold idea, but we don't have time to run these kinds of long-term simulations. We're up against a ticking clock." Maya nodded, understanding the hesitation. "I know, but if we don't do this now, we risk everything. We've seen how fragile these ecosystems are, and we've been ignoring the underlying problems. I can't make that mistake again." A few of the other scientists in the room exchanged wary glances. The air was thick with uncertainty. "I don't know if this is going to work," one of the senior researchers, Dr. Patel, said. "We're already running out of time, and this is a massive pivot. If we try to fix something that wasn't even part of the original design." "We don't have a choice," Maya interrupted, her voice rising with intensity. "We can't fix what we don't understand. The Earth is telling us what it needs. We have to listen." There was a long silence. It was as if Maya's words had settled into the room, leaving behind the weight of an uncomfortable truth. Finally, Elias spoke again, his voice quiet but resolute. "We'll do it. We'll help you make it work. But we need to move fast." Maya exhaled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. The team was back on her side. The next few days were a blur of activity. They worked with a renewed sense of purpose, tweaking the core systems to address the fundamental issues in the oceans and ice caps. It wasn't just about adding more data points or making more simulations. It was about understanding the interconnectedness of the Earth's systems and creating a solution that would balance them all, without forcing them into unnatural conformity. But even as they worked tirelessly, the world outside was beginning to feel the strain. News outlets reported increasing natural disasters: hurricanes, heat waves, floods, and earthquakes, all seemingly linked to the destabilizing forces at play. Maya could feel the collective anxiety of the world mounting, like an unstoppable wave about to crash over them. Musk's calls became more frequent, his demands more pressing. "How much longer? I'm getting reports from investors. This is getting too messy. You need results, Dr. Lin, or we'll have to shut this down." Maya's patience was wearing thin. "I told you, we're on it, and we will have results. But you have to understand, this isn't something that can be rushed. We're trying to save the Earth, not just make a quick profit." Musk's voice hardened. "You're running out of time, Maya. Don't make me remind you." The line went dead, leaving her in a cold, suffocating silence. The emotional toll of the past few months, the constant pressure, the sleepless nights, the overwhelming responsibility, finally caught up with her. She had given everything to this project, but now, standing on the precipice of failure, it felt like she was losing more than just the world's future. She was losing herself. The world was on the edge. As the hours ticked down, the team worked relentlessly. Maya felt the immense weight of the task ahead, knowing that one misstep could destroy everything. Then, just when it seemed like all hope was slipping away, the new data began to shift. Slowly, at first, then with increasing speed, the indicators began to show signs of stabilization. The microbial activity beneath the ice caps had started to balance itself out. The soil acidity began to level, and the oceans seemed to regain their natural cycles. Maya watched, breathless, as the numbers transformed. It was working. They were doing it. But the battle was far from over. As she looked around the lab, she realized that the true test was not in the technology or the science. It was in the strength and resilience of the team, and the belief that they could still turn things around. And in that moment, Maya understood something profound. This wasn't just about saving the planet. It was about saving themselves and finding hope, even in the darkest of times. The breakthrough in the Amazon was just the beginning, and Maya knew it. The data from the ice caps, the oceans, and the unstable weather systems were all pointing to the same conclusion. Humanity had reached the brink. No matter how much they tinkered with the models, nature was pushing back harder than ever. But even as she worked, her thoughts began to grow heavier. They weren't just solving a puzzle. They were playing catch-up to forces that had been in motion for centuries. The team had made progress in certain areas. The recalibrated models for the Amazon were showing promise, and Antarctica's ice sheets were stabilizing after their last round of adjustments. Yet, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were barely keeping up. Every time they fixed one issue, another popped up, bigger and more dangerous. The real challenge, she knew, wasn't just saving the ecosystems. It was maintaining the fine balance between them. The more they altered the Earth systems, the more volatile the results became. And while they had found temporary solutions, the long-term viability of these fixes was still an unknown. Was it sustainable? Was it enough? It was late afternoon when Maya received the call. This time, it wasn't from Musk directly. The voice on the other end was smoother, more polished, one of the top investors in the EcoVision project. Dr. Lin, I hope you're well, the voice began. But there was a noticeable edge to it. I'm afraid we need to discuss the project's future. We've been getting more frequent reports of extreme weather events, hurricanes, flooding, wildfires, and the public is beginning to panic. Your models are promising, but they're not solving the immediate crisis. You understand what I'm saying? Maya stiffened, hearing the unspoken threat behind the words. I understand, but we're making progress. These systems take time. It's a complex web. Every step we take is a step closer to stabilizing things. The investor's tone grew sharper. Time is exactly what we don't have. You and your team need to prove this works now. The investors are becoming nervous, and if we don't see tangible results soon, we may have to pull funding. Maya's heart dropped. You can't just pull funding. We're on the cusp of something huge here. I can't rush these things. Nature doesn't work on a timeline. I know, Dr. Lin, the investor replied, his voice turning cold, but we need results, or we'll have no choice. The world's watching, and we can't afford to fail. The line went dead. Maya sat in silence for a long moment, her mind spinning. The pressure was mounting, now, not just from Musk but from the very people who had financed this ambitious endeavor. How could she make them understand? How could she push forward, when time itself seemed like the enemy? Days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and stressful meetings. Maya worked tirelessly with her team, tweaking, adjusting, and recalculating every data point. She felt like she was trapped in a never-ending cycle of hope and disappointment. In one of the late-night sessions, Elias sat across from her, his face pale and weary. Maya, this has to be the last tweak. We've pushed the system to its limits. She didn't look up from her screen. We can't stop now. Not when we're this close. We've made too many adjustments to give up. We have to keep going. Elias exhaled deeply, frustration bubbling in his voice. But Maya, how much more can we take? Every time we think we're close, something else destabilizes. You've seen the latest data from the Pacific Ocean. It's getting worse. She stopped typing and turned to look at him. I know, she said softly. I've seen it too. But if we don't fix this now, if we don't take this one last chance to recalibrate everything, the whole project could collapse. We can't afford to fail. Elias didn't respond immediately, his eyes tired, his expression clouded with doubt. I know, but sometimes it feels like we're playing God. Are we really ready to take on the responsibility for the entire planet? Maya's breath caught in her throat. His words echoed in her mind, playing God. They hadn't thought of it that way before. But now, in this moment, the enormity of their mission hit her like a ton of bricks. Were they truly capable of controlling the Earth's future, even with all their technology and data? Could they really be the stewards of this delicate planet? I don't know, she said softly, almost to herself, but I don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. Just when Maya thought things couldn't get worse, they did. Late one night, Maya and Elias sat together in the lab, running the latest batch of simulations. The data from the Pacific Ocean had become increasingly concerning, and the predictions were growing bleaker. It wasn't just the storms anymore. It was the ocean currents themselves. They were shifting in unpredictable ways, disrupting marine ecosystems and throwing off the food chain. Entire coastal regions were at risk of flooding, and the new models they'd implemented weren't enough to prevent it. This can't be happening, Maya muttered, staring at the screen in disbelief. We thought we had accounted for everything. But the reality was clear. Nature wasn't responding as they had expected. The world was unraveling faster than they could repair it. Elias turned to her, his voice low. Maya, we've done everything we can. But sometimes, things break beyond repair. Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him that they could still fix it, that they had to fix it. But deep down, she knew that this moment, this crisis, was unlike anything they had ever faced. The ecological systems they had tried to manipulate were buckling under the strain. No amount of algorithms, no amount of technology could turn back the clock. She stood up abruptly, pacing the room. We can't just let it go. We have to act. There has to be something we missed, something we can still do. As days turned into weeks, Maya's obsession with solving the ecological disaster took a personal toll. She hadn't spoken to her family in weeks, hadn't eaten properly, barely slept. The constant stress was wearing her thin, but the thought of giving up was unbearable. One evening, when the lab was empty except for her and Elias, Maya checked her phone. There was a message from her mother. Maya, please. I know you're busy, but we haven't heard from you. We're worried. Maya's heart ached as she stared at the screen. She hadn't seen her parents in months, had barely spoken to them. The project had consumed her, and in the process, she had pushed away the people who cared about her most. I've lost touch, she whispered to herself. She felt her eyes burn with exhaustion, with frustration. Not just over the project, but over her own choices. She had become so fixated on saving the world that she had forgotten to live. Elias glanced at her. You okay? Maya shook her head, her voice trembling. I don't know anymore. I can't do this alone. And I don't know if I can keep pretending like I have all the answers. Elias stood up and walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone, Maya. We're all in this together. And we'll figure it out. One step at a time. Maya took a deep breath, the weight of her exhaustion almost too much to bear. But Elias' words reminded her of something important. They were a team. And the only way they would get through this was together. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about having the courage to keep moving forward, even when the world felt like it was collapsing around them. With a renewed sense of determination, Maya sat back down at her desk. They weren't finished yet. She wasn't ready to give up. The Earth was fighting back, yes, but so was she. And in that moment, Maya knew that no matter how daunting the challenge, she wouldn't stop fighting for a better future. Even if the stakes were higher than ever, even if it meant risking everything. Despite Maya's renewed resolve, the pressure only intensified. Every hour felt like a battle to hold back an impending storm, both literal and metaphorical. As she and Elias continued to refine the models, every new test revealed something even more alarming. The oceans, the ice caps, the soil. Everything seemed to be reaching a tipping point faster than they had predicted. Nature was no longer just reacting to the damage. It was rebelling. Maya paced back and forth in the lab, staring at the projections on the wall. The Pacific's acidification was spiking beyond even the worst-case scenarios. The Arctic's ice sheets, once thought to be stable, were now showing unprecedented rates of melt, with signs that even the Greenland ice sheet might soon collapse. The weather had become a vicious feedback loop, each disaster feeding the next. Every fix we apply seems to break something else, Elias said, his voice tinged with frustration. We're plugging holes in a dam, but the water keeps rising. I know, Maya muttered, but we can't stop now. We need a solution. We need a breakthrough, Elias. He rubbed his eyes, clearly drained. You can't just keep pushing harder. You're burning yourself out. We need perspective. Maya barely heard him. Her mind was consumed with the data, the patterns, the numbers. There had to be something they were missing. Some critical piece of the puzzle that they hadn't discovered yet. Something deeper, something they hadn't accounted for. That night, as Maya pored over the latest simulations, a strange notification popped up on her screen. It was from an anonymous source, an encrypted message. Dr. Lin, you are on the right path, but you are missing the core principle. What you are trying to fix is not a simple ecological problem. The Earth is telling you something that goes beyond your models. To save the planet, you must first understand the true cost of human interference. The message ended with a series of numbers, a cryptic code. Maya stared at the message, unsure of what to make of it. What does this mean? She whispered to herself. Was it a warning? A clue? The urgency of it sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't ignore it. Elias walked into the room, noting her distracted expression. What is it? Maya turned the screen toward him. Look at this. Elias raised an eyebrow. It's just a cryptic message. Someone trying to mess with you. No, it's not like that, Maya said, her voice shaky. This feels real. Like they're telling us we've missed something. Elias studied the code. I don't know, Maya. It could be a hacker or someone with an agenda. But you're right. It doesn't feel like a random message. There was a moment of silence as both of them pondered the implications. If this message was legitimate, then it was clear. They hadn't been seeing the full picture. They were missing a crucial element of the equation. We need to figure out what this means, Maya said, her voice firm. We can't afford to overlook anything now. The next morning, Maya and Elias worked late into the day, trying to decode the message. The numbers didn't seem to fit any recognizable pattern, and the phrase, the true cost of human interference, echoed in Maya's mind. What did that mean? They had always known that human activity had caused environmental damage, but could there be something more profound at play? Something they hadn't accounted for? They reached out to some of the brightest minds in the field, searching for any correlation or historical references to this phrase or the code. Hours passed and frustration mounted. But then Elias found something. Buried deep in one of the most obscure scientific papers, published decades ago, was a reference to a similar idea. The true cost was discussed in a study about the Earth's natural cycles and how human intervention, while often focused on surface-level fixes, often ignored the deeper, more systemic damage that had been done to the planet's most vital systems. The paper talks about the Earth's immune system, a natural regulatory mechanism that has been severely compromised, Elias said, his voice tense with realization. It suggests that the Earth has an inherent ability to restore balance, but only if its deeper systems remain intact. If humans interfere too much, they risk breaking that system. Maya's eyes widened. She remembered reading about Gaia theory in school, a hypothesis that viewed the Earth as a self-regulating organism. Could this be what they had been overlooking? The Earth wasn't just a collection of ecosystems that could be fixed with technology. It was a living system, with its own mechanisms for survival. But this is more than just ecosystems, Elias continued, his voice strained. If the Earth's immune system is broken, there's no coming back. We're in deeper trouble than we thought. Maya felt the ground beneath her shift. She had always believed that human ingenuity and technology could save the planet, that they could fix what had been broken. But now, a terrifying thought entered her mind. What if they had been wrong? What if the real problem was much bigger than they had ever imagined? As the data continued to come in, confirming Elias's theory, it became clear that the Earth was not just fighting back. It was beginning to collapse under the weight of human interference. The balance of nature wasn't something that could be fixed by a few technological adjustments. The fundamental systems that had once kept everything in check were now failing, and humanity had unwittingly pushed them past the point of repair. Maya felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. They were standing on the precipice, and she could see no way forward. The more they tried to intervene, the more they disrupted the natural processes that were trying to heal the planet. In the days that followed, Maya wrestled with the idea of giving up. It wasn't just the failure of the models. It wasn't just the overwhelming weight of responsibility. It was the fear that they had misunderstood the problem completely. She couldn't stop thinking about the message. The true cost of human interference. Maybe the answer wasn't to keep fixing things with technology. Maybe they needed to take a step back and let nature restore itself. But that was a terrifying prospect. How could they just stop? How could they leave the world to heal on its own when they knew the damage they had caused? It felt like giving up, like abandoning the people who had trusted her to save the world. Maya's thoughts were interrupted by a call from Musk. His voice, as usual, was urgent. "We need answers, Maya. Fast. The pressure is building. There's been another catastrophic weather event in the Midwest, and the stock market is reacting to the uncertainty around EcoVision. Investors are panicking." "I know," Maya said, her voice strained, "but there's something bigger at play here. We've been trying to fix everything on the surface, but the deeper systems are broken. If we don't stop and rethink our approach, we're just accelerating the collapse." Musk didn't respond right away. When he did, it was with a cold edge. "So you're saying we can't fix it? That we should let nature take its course?" "I don't know," Maya replied, her voice quiet. "But I don't think we can keep pushing forward like this. The cost is too high." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Musk spoke, his tone grim. "Do what you think is best. But remember, if you fail, you'll have the weight of the world on your shoulders." Maya sat in the lab, surrounded by the data. She had a choice to make. She could keep going, pushing forward with technology and innovation, hoping for a miracle. Or she could take a step back, admit that they were part of the problem, and allow the Earth systems to find their own balance. As she thought about it, she realized that this was more than just a scientific dilemma. It was a philosophical one. Could humanity continue to exist in harmony with the Earth? Could they, in their quest to save the planet, also learn how to let go? The decision wasn't clear, but it was becoming increasingly obvious that the road they had been on was not the answer. It was time for a new path, time for a radical shift. With a deep breath, Maya opened a new set of simulations. But this time, she wasn't looking for answers from data alone. She was looking for something deeper, something beyond the equations. The Earth had its own way of healing. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop trying to control it. Maya felt the weight of her decision settle on her chest like a stone. The choice she had made wasn't easy. In fact, it had felt like surrender. But deep down, she knew she could no longer ignore the truth she'd uncovered. The Earth's self-regulating systems weren't just fragile. They were incredibly complex, and human interference might have already pushed them beyond the point of no return. Perhaps the key to saving the planet wasn't just fixing things. It was understanding when to step back. With a deep breath, she typed out an email to Musk. The words came slowly, each one heavier than the last. It wasn't just a message about their progress, but about a shift in their entire approach. Subject: a new approach, rethinking the strategy. Elon, I've come to a conclusion. After careful consideration and more analysis, I believe we are at a crossroads. The models, as promising as they've seemed, are not enough. We've been trying to heal the Earth's wounds using technology, but the core issue lies deeper. I believe that human interference, no matter how well-intentioned, is doing more harm than good at this stage. We need to allow nature to repair itself, albeit in a more controlled way than what we've been doing so far. The systems we've been working with are not simple mechanisms. They are living, evolving processes. To heal, we may need to let go of some of the control we've been exerting. This isn't about giving up. It's about accepting the Earth's inherent power to restore balance on its own terms. I hope you'll see the merit in this approach. We'll need to rethink how we proceed. Maya hit send with a mix of hope and dread. She didn't expect an immediate response. She knew Musk was a man of action, and her suggestion to step back, to let go of control, probably sounded like the antithesis of everything he stood for. But as she waited, the silence grew heavier. Each minute stretched longer than the last. The next day, there was still no reply from Musk. It wasn't like him to be silent for this long, and Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of his absence. There was a looming uncertainty about their next steps, not just in the project, but in their relationship with the planet they were trying to save. Had she made the right choice? Was this a moment of brilliance, or the beginning of failure? Her thoughts were interrupted when Elias entered the lab, looking more concerned than usual. Maya, he began. I've been going over the simulations again. I think I've found something. Maya turned toward him, her curiosity piqued. What is it? Elias hesitated, glancing down at his tablet. It's the same message we got a few days ago, the one that pointed us to the paper on the Earth's immune system. It's connected to something bigger. It's not just a random message, Maya. It's a pattern. Maya's pulse quickened. A pattern? What do you mean? He tapped a few commands on the tablet, and the screen shifted, displaying a map of the world with several glowing markers. Each marker was linked to a different natural disaster. Hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, events that seemed disconnected at first glance. But as Elias zoomed in, the markers aligned in a pattern that Maya had never seen before. They're all connected, Elias said, his voice shaking slightly. It's like the Earth is trying to tell us something. Look here. He zoomed in on the Pacific Ocean, where a series of seismic events had occurred in the past few weeks. This is where the energy is building up, under the surface. It's like the planet is winding up for something catastrophic. Maya's heart sank. Are you saying that this is connected to our interference? The Earth's immune system is fighting back? I don't know, Elias replied, but it's too much to ignore. The data is clear. And it's not just the natural disasters. I looked deeper into the code we received. It's pointing to something that humans have never considered. What do you mean? Maya asked. The code, it references a theory, one that wasn't just about ecological balance. It's about time, temporal stability. If we continue to manipulate the Earth's systems without considering the larger historical cycles of the planet, we're risking a destabilization that could affect the entire timeline of Earth's natural progression. It's like we're speeding things up, causing rifts in the fabric of the planet's own temporal rhythm. Maya's mind raced. She'd always understood the Earth's ecosystems were delicate, but this was something entirely different. They weren't just altering the environment, they were altering the very rhythms of the planet. This is huge, Maya whispered, staring at the screen. If this is true, if we've disrupted the planet's natural cycles this much, Elias nodded grimly. We might be at the point of no return. And if we don't correct this, the Earth might collapse on itself, at a scale we can't even imagine. By the time Elon Musk's response arrived, Maya was already too deep into the implications of Elias's findings to care about the consequences of her earlier email. She opened the message with a sense of grim anticipation. Subject, a new approach, rethinking the strategy. Maya, I've read your email. I'll admit, I didn't expect this. You're suggesting we stop pushing, let go of the technology, and let nature take over? It's not a solution I had in mind. But you're right. We've been trying to solve this with short-term fixes, and the planet is telling us something we've missed. Perhaps we've underestimated the depth of our impact. I want you to take a week to explore this further. Talk to the scientists, talk to the team, and find out what the real cost of our interference is. But understand this, we can't afford to wait too long. The public is watching. Investors are breathing down our necks. If you're right, we need to act fast. Let me know what you find. Elon. Maya stared at the screen, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over her. Musk had acknowledged the possibility, but the time frame was still the same. He was giving her a week to prove her theory. A week. That's all they had before everything could collapse. Not just the environment, but the project, the funding, the future. She turned to Elias. We need to act fast. There's no time to waste. We need to gather as much data as possible. If there's a way to reverse this, or at least slow it down, it's now or never. Elias nodded, but the uncertainty in his eyes mirrored her own. Where do we even start? Maya closed her eyes, trying to collect her thoughts. We start by going back to the beginning. We dig deeper into the Earth's natural cycles. We look for patterns, for clues. If there's one thing I know, it's that the Earth's rhythms have a language of their own, and we need to learn to listen. As the week progressed, Maya and Elias, along with their team, delved deeper into the theory that had begun to shape their understanding of the planet's current state. They pored over ancient climate data, ecological models, and even indigenous knowledge. Anything that might shed light on the long-term patterns of Earth's health. What they discovered shook them to their core. The Earth's natural systems didn't just regulate themselves. They were interconnected in ways that had never been fully understood. Every shift in one part of the system rippled out to affect others in a complex web. By trying to fix the surface issues, they had neglected the hidden depths of the planet's self-regulation. In their quest to save the planet, they had inadvertently triggered the kind of instability that would take centuries, if not millennia, to recover from. Maya stood at the window, staring out at the sprawling cityscape beneath her. The sun was setting, casting an eerie orange glow across the horizon. The skyline looked so peaceful, so untouched by the chaos that was unfolding beneath the surface. But Maya knew better now. The peacefulness was an illusion, just like the sense of control humanity had once felt over the Earth. She exhaled sharply, her breath visible in the cold air. Time was running out. Elon Musk had given them a week to find a solution, but every piece of evidence they had uncovered pointed to a darker truth. The window of recovery was closing fast, and the more they pushed, the harder it would be to reverse the damage. But there was still a chance, just a small one. "We need to stop fixing things and start listening," Maya muttered to herself, replaying Elias's words from the day before. She couldn't shake the sense that they were so close to uncovering the final piece of the puzzle. They were on the cusp of understanding what the planet really needed. Not more technology, not more solutions, but a return to balance. Over the past few days, Maya and Elias had worked tirelessly, poring over historical climate patterns, examining seismic activity, and even looking at ancient agricultural practices. They'd scoured every scrap of knowledge they could find, and slowly, a theory was beginning to form, one that was both unsettling and profound. The Earth, they had learned, was not just responding to human interference. It was actively trying to communicate, to reassert its natural rhythms and patterns. It was as though the planet had a hidden energy, a kind of heartbeat that was disturbed every time they tried to fix things artificially. Each intervention, be it geoengineering, deforestation, or even efforts to manipulate the weather, was like a jolt to this natural pulse. "We're not fixing the problem. We're making it worse," Elias had concluded after reviewing data from their most recent simulations. "Every time we try to intervene, we disrupt something we don't fully understand. But we can't just do nothing," Maya had retorted. "People are dying, ecosystems are collapsing. What are we supposed to do? Wait for nature to heal itself while everything burns down?" Elias had looked at her then, his expression a mixture of concern and resignation. "We have to find a way to make peace with nature, Maya. We've been trying to play God, but maybe the answer isn't to fix things. Maybe it's to restore the balance we've disturbed." Maya knew Elias was right, but the question that haunted her remained. How could they let go of control in the midst of a global crisis? On the 7th day of their deep dive, they stumbled upon a potential breakthrough, a theory proposed by a lesser-known climate scientist decades ago. The scientist, a woman named Dr. Helena Crow, had suggested that Earth's natural cycles, particularly those of energy transfer between the oceans, atmosphere, and land, were not just vital for maintaining ecological balance, they were crucial for stabilizing the planet's overall energy field. If this energy field became unbalanced, the planet itself could go into a state of chaos, unable to regulate its own systems. What if we're not just interrupting the environment, but the very energy flows of the Earth? Maya asked, as she read Dr. Crow's work aloud to Elias. What if all these attempts to intervene, whether it's with geoengineering or technological fixes, are actually short-circuiting the Earth's energy system? Elias's face lit up with understanding. Yes, that's what the patterns were showing. It's not just about ecosystems. This is bigger than that. It's about the entire energy structure of the planet. When we tried to manipulate the climate with artificial systems, we didn't just disrupt the ecosystems. We disrupted the Earth's natural energy flow. And now the whole thing is spiraling out of control? Maya nodded. We've been thinking too small. We've been focusing on individual problems, floods, fires, droughts, when the real issue is how these events are interlinked. They're all part of a larger energy imbalance. Maya took a deep breath and turned to Elias. We need to make a decision. We can't keep going down this path. If we try to fix the problem using the same methods, we'll make it worse. We need to step back. The Earth needs to heal itself. Elias was quiet for a moment, then nodded. But how do we do that? If we stop intervening, things could get even worse in the short term. People will suffer. I know, Maya said softly, but we've reached the point where our attempts to fix things are only exacerbating the problem. We need to figure out a way to stop the bleeding, but also create space for the planet to restore its natural systems. She looked at Elias, a quiet resolve in her eyes. We need to propose a radical new plan to Musk, one that recognizes that humanity is part of the Earth's system, not separate from it. We can't keep trying to control the planet. We have to trust that it has its own way of healing. But we can help it. We can guide the healing without disrupting the flow. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she typed out a message to Elon Musk. The stakes had never been higher, and this was not going to be an easy conversation. But she had come to the realization that they were at a turning point. If they didn't act now, there would be nothing left to save. Elon, after much thought, I've come to a difficult conclusion. We cannot continue with the same methods. The Earth's systems are not simple to fix. They're interconnected in ways we don't fully understand. Our attempts to intervene directly are only exacerbating the problem. I propose that we shift our focus. Instead of trying to control nature, we need to step back and allow the Earth to heal itself. I'm not suggesting doing nothing. I'm suggesting we create the conditions that allow for natural restoration. This will require a shift in how we approach everything from geoengineering to industrial practices. It's a radical change, but I believe it's the only way forward. I know this is not what you expected, but it's the only way we can ensure long-term survival for humanity and the planet. We cannot fix everything with technology alone. We need a new philosophy, one that recognizes the Earth's ability to heal itself if we allow it the space to do so. Maya sat back, staring at the message for a long time. This was a risky proposition. If Musk didn't buy into the idea, it could mean the end of the project, and perhaps the end of their hopes to restore any balance to the planet. But if he did, if he was willing to take this radical step, they might just have a chance. She hit send and waited. A few hours later, the response came. Maya, I've been thinking about this a lot. And, honestly, I didn't want to admit it, but I think you're right. We've been so focused on technology as the solution that we've ignored the bigger picture. It's terrifying, but I believe we have no choice now but to step back and allow nature to take the reins. We'll need to proceed carefully, of course, and we can't afford to do this recklessly. But I'm willing to take that risk. I'm in. Let's see if we can't turn this around. Together. Elon. Maya read the message twice, disbelief sinking in. Musk, the tech visionary who had built an empire by mastering the forces of nature through innovation, was actually agreeing with her. It was a huge victory, but it came with a sobering realization. They had no more time to waste. The future of the planet, and the future of humanity, depended on how they navigated the road ahead. The path they had chosen was uncertain, but it was the only one left. The days following Elon Musk's agreement were a whirlwind of activity. Maya, Elias, and their team dove headfirst into developing a comprehensive plan to allow Earth to heal without further human interference. They knew they didn't have much time. The world was still reeling from the rapid rise in natural disasters, and if their new approach didn't work, they might risk making things worse. Maya stood before the team in their makeshift command center, a space that had once been filled with complex technological diagrams and climate models. Now, the walls were covered in sketches of a different kind, diagrams showing natural cycles, interconnected ecosystems, and the energy flows of the planet. They were moving away from the technology that had defined their work for so long. Now, they were focusing on understanding and facilitating Earth's own processes. We have one shot at this, Maya said, her voice steady but her heart racing. Elon believes in this. He's committed to stepping back and allowing nature to take the lead. But we need a framework for this new approach. We can't just stop everything. We need to understand what space we need to create for the Earth to heal. We have to find that balance. Elias, who had been working late into the night with his team of researchers, raised his hand. We've made some headway. The key might be creating specific areas of ecological refuge, places where human activity is minimized, allowing natural regeneration to occur. We've also been looking into the idea of controlled interventions, where we focus on restoring natural systems, not controlling them. Maya nodded. So, we create these natural sanctuaries, regions where the ecosystems are given full autonomy. But we also need to ensure that the areas around them can gradually stabilize without overwhelming the sanctuaries themselves. And we do all of this without disrupting the Earth's natural energy flow. The idea was bold, and it felt like a gamble, but it was the only option left. They would need to convince world leaders, corporations, and the public that this new approach was the only way forward. The hardest part wasn't the science, it was the politics. A few days after finalizing their internal strategy, Maya was on a call with Elon. His voice, usually brimming with energy, sounded pensive. "Maya, I've been talking to the board," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "The investors are asking tough questions. They want results. And we're not giving them any clear answers yet." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud made it real. "I understand. But this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. We're asking for a paradigm shift. We can't give them results in the way they want. We're working on something that might take years, even decades to see through." "I know," Musk replied, "but the world can't wait. The climate crisis is escalating faster than we can predict. People are desperate for solutions now, and the solutions we've been offering haven't worked," Maya countered, her voice firm. "If we keep trying to fix everything with technology and short-term fixes, we'll only make it worse. I'm asking for their patience, Elon. I'm asking for their trust that we're working towards something bigger than all of us." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Musk spoke again, softer this time. "All right, Maya, I'll back you. But you need to make the case, convince them. Show them that this approach isn't just about saving the planet. It's about securing humanity's future." Maya felt a wave of gratitude mixed with the weight of the responsibility. "I'll make sure they understand. Thank you." The next week was a blur. Maya and the team spent long hours drafting reports, writing speeches, and preparing the data to present to the world. Elon, true to his word, pushed forward with his commitment, securing a global platform for the announcement. They would be presenting their new vision at the World Climate Summit. Maya, standing on stage before a packed room of global leaders, environmental activists, and business moguls, took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This wasn't just a speech, it was a plea for understanding, for a shift in the way humanity saw its relationship with the Earth. She looked out at the crowd, gathering her thoughts. This was the moment where everything could change, or everything could fall apart. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here," she began. "For the past century, we've lived under the illusion that we can control nature. We've fought against it, we've manipulated it, and we've tried to engineer our way out of the problems we've created. But in doing so, we've ignored the most fundamental truth. We are not separate from the Earth. We are part of it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Maya paused, letting the words sink in. "We've reached a turning point. We can't continue with business as usual. The systems we've built, our economies, our technologies, our industries, are inextricably tied to the health of the planet. But the more we try to control the Earth, the more we push it to the brink. The time has come to let go of the illusion of control and to trust in the planet's ability to heal itself." She let that message sit for a moment before continuing. "We're proposing a new approach, one that prioritizes ecological restoration over industrial progress. We will create sanctuaries for the Earth, areas where human activity is minimized and natural systems are allowed to regenerate. But this isn't about doing nothing. This is about working with nature, not against it. We will focus on restoring the planet's energy flow, stabilizing ecosystems, and allowing the Earth's own cycles to guide us forward." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the crowd. Maya could see the skepticism in their eyes, but she also saw the flicker of hope, the understanding that this might be the only way forward. "We cannot save the planet by continuing to dominate it," she concluded. "But we can help it heal, and in doing so, we'll ensure the survival of humanity for generations to come. This is our final chance to do things right. Let's make it count." After the presentation, the response was immediate. While some hailed Maya and her team as visionaries, others were far less convinced. The media buzzed with debates, some calling it the boldest move in human history, others labeling it naive idealism. But the most vocal pushback came from the very industries that had profited from technological domination: oil, agriculture, and manufacturing. Do we really want to gamble humanity's future on an idea that's based on fantasy? One of the leading CEOs said in an interview. We need solutions that work today, not tomorrow. But Maya didn't waver. She knew the stakes. She knew that this plan was not about immediate results. It was about securing a future that was sustainable for all of humanity. The coming months would be crucial. They would need to convince governments, businesses, and the public that this wasn't just a pipe dream. It was a plan grounded in science, history, and the most important lesson humanity could learn. We had to stop thinking of ourselves as masters of the earth. Instead, we had to see ourselves as partners in a larger, interconnected system. But for now, they had made their first step. The world had heard their message, and the conversation was just beginning. The weeks following Maya's bold proposal were both exhilarating and exasperating. Despite the initial wave of curiosity and support, the resistance from powerful sectors of society became glaringly obvious. Elon Musk had warned her about the backlash, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the scale of opposition. While some of the world's top climate scientists applauded the new approach, many governments and corporations scrambled to maintain their existing frameworks. For them, the idea of relinquishing control to natural processes, even in part, seemed like the height of recklessness. Maya found herself in one tough meeting after another, trying to convince skeptical policymakers and business leaders that the future lay not in control, but in collaboration with the Earth. It started with a video call with the European Union's Climate Committee. They were skeptical but willing to listen. "We're facing the worst ecological crisis of our time," Maya began, her voice calm but insistent. "And yet, we keep doubling down on solutions that are only making it worse. Our proposal isn't a gamble. It's a strategy for survival." One of the senior officials, an older man with sharp features and an air of authority, leaned forward. "You want us to put the fate of our economies in the hands of nature? Do you realize the chaos this could cause? Entire industries are built on resource extraction, technology, and innovation. If we step back, what happens to them? What happens to the jobs, the markets?" "We're not abandoning progress," Maya countered, keeping her voice steady. "We're acknowledging that economic growth cannot be divorced from ecological health. The markets, the industries, they will evolve. But not if we continue on this destructive path. We're offering a new framework for growth, one that includes ecological restoration as a key driver of economic and social development." The room was quiet for a moment, and Maya could feel the weight of their doubt hanging in the air. "Is there evidence that this approach will work?" one of the committee members asked, her voice sharp. "Or are we just hoping for a miracle?" Maya took a breath, meeting their eyes through the screen. "We are not hoping for a miracle. We have data. We have case studies from small-scale ecological restoration projects. We've seen how allowing natural systems to regenerate has transformed local environments. The question is not whether it will work, but whether we are ready to make the leap." The officials exchanged glances, and after a long pause, the leader of the committee spoke again. "This is a risk, a monumental one, but perhaps it's the only one we have left." He looked directly at Maya. "We'll give you a year. A year to show that your vision can work in real-world applications. But understand this, if you fail, the consequences will be dire. We won't have the luxury of more time." By now, news of the European Committee's partial approval had spread, but the response from other parts of the world was far less optimistic. Some nations, especially those heavily invested in fossil fuels, viewed the plan as a direct threat to their power and financial stability. In the United States, the corporate lobbyists were vocal. A group of oil and gas executives launched a campaign decrying the dangerous naivete of the ecological restoration strategy. They framed it as an existential threat to national security, arguing that the world could not afford to abandon energy independence in the name of vague environmental ideals. On the flip side, grassroots movements from environmental activists to indigenous communities rallied behind Maya's vision, pushing for a transition to renewable energy, sustainable farming practices, and land restoration. But it wasn't enough. The tide of corporate resistance was strong, and it was gaining momentum. In the midst of these challenges, Maya and Elias met with Elon Musk in person, seeking a moment of clarity in the chaos. Maya sat across from him in the sleek, futuristic conference room at SpaceX headquarters. Musk was unusually quiet, his usual charisma tempered by the weight of their shared responsibility. "Are you sure about this?" Elon finally asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "This plan, it's not just radical. It's unprecedented. People don't want to change. They want comfort. They want guarantees." Maya nodded. She could feel the tension building in her chest. "I know, but this is the only way. If we continue down this path of technological dominance and manipulation, we'll only accelerate the destruction. I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking for faith. Faith that humanity can evolve beyond its own limitations." Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he thought. "I believe in the power of humanity to innovate, but I'm beginning to see that innovation alone might not be enough. Perhaps what we need is a shift in perspective, not just from technology, but from how we view our role in the world." "I've said it before," Maya replied, her voice resolute. "We are part of the Earth. We can't keep thinking of ourselves as separate from it. Our technologies, our innovations, they need to work with nature, not against it. This isn't about abandoning progress. It's about rethinking what progress looks like." Elon was silent for a moment, then he spoke, a touch of admiration in his voice. "You're right. And maybe the future isn't just about colonizing Mars or creating the next breakthrough tech. Maybe it's about creating a new kind of harmony on Earth." Maya felt a flicker of hope. Yes, harmony. That's what we need to find. However, even as Musk came around, the world was far from ready to embrace the radical shift. A key moment arrived when a multinational corporation, one of the world's largest agribusinesses, publicly rejected the proposal. They released a report outlining the dire economic consequences of abandoning industrial farming practices, warning that billions of people depended on the current agricultural model. In response, Maya and Elias presented an alternative vision at a press conference, unveiling a new initiative called agro-regeneration, a program designed to transition industrial farming into sustainable, regenerative practices that worked in tandem with the Earth's natural cycles. But the pushback was fierce. Farmers in rural regions, particularly in the U.S. Midwest, were concerned that regenerative practices wouldn't produce the yields they needed to sustain growing populations. In the financial markets, ever watchful of any instability, were quick to react. "It's too risky," one analyst said. "The system is already fragile. We can't afford to experiment with unproven methods." As the debate intensified, Maya found herself caught in a tug-of-war between those pushing for immediate action and those holding on to the old ways. But there was something else, a growing sense of urgency from the planet itself. The latest climate models were beginning to predict catastrophic weather patterns, intensified storms, flooding, and droughts that could hit in the coming months if their plans didn't gain traction soon. Maya had seen the data. She knew the urgency was real. But the question remained. Would the world be able to unite behind this new vision before it was too late? At night, she sat in her office, staring at the screen as the latest news reports rolled in. The resistance was relentless. Yet, she also saw the glimmers of hope, grassroots movements gaining strength, communities beginning to adopt more sustainable practices, and small victories in the realm of ecological restoration. She knew they weren't winning the battle yet, but they were starting to plant the seeds. The question was, how many of those seeds would take root before the Earth systems could no longer bear the weight of humanity's mistakes? As the days turned into weeks, the situation became increasingly dire. The pushback against Maya and Elias's ecological restoration plan was no longer just a matter of business interests and political resistance. It had evolved into a battle for the very future of humanity, with both sides entrenched in a dangerous standoff. Maya could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. Every new report, every debate, every conversation felt like a ticking clock. The climate models were becoming more alarming by the day. A catastrophic event, a series of wildfires that decimated entire regions of the Amazon rainforest, had put the final nail in the coffin of the old world order. The fires had been fueled by the worst drought the region had seen in decades. It was a direct result of humanity's disregard for nature's delicate balance. It was on one of those nights, while watching the live coverage of the Amazon fires, that Maya received an urgent message from Elon. The fires were not just a symbol of the planet's suffering. They were a signal, a turning point. Elon had arranged a meeting with key global leaders to discuss the way forward, and he wanted Maya there, at the forefront of the conversation. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of anxiety, but also a spark of hope. She knew that this could be the moment that turned the tide. For months, they had been struggling to get the world to listen. But now, the crisis was undeniable. The fires, the floods, the droughts, they were all consequences of humanity's refusal to acknowledge its role in the Earth's ecosystem. People were finally starting to see the truth. The World Climate Summit was being held in a sleek, modern building in Geneva. The room was filled with world leaders, corporate magnates, scientists, and environmental activists. It was a microcosm of the global divide. On one side, those who believed in the status quo, corporations, politicians, and industry giants. On the other side, the environmentalists, the scientists, and the visionaries who had been calling for radical change. Maya stepped onto the stage with Elon, her heart pounding. This was it, the final attempt to shift the global narrative. She glanced at Elon, who gave her a brief nod of reassurance. He had come to terms with the fact that this wasn't just about technology or business anymore. It was about survival. The stage was set for a historic presentation, one that could either secure the future of the planet or condemn it to further devastation. Maya took the microphone, her voice steady but full of urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I stand before you today not as a scientist, not as a visionary, but as a mother, because I am fighting for the future of my children, my grandchildren, and every child yet to be born. I'm fighting for the future of this planet, which is our home. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The crisis we face is no longer just an environmental issue. It's a human issue, a moral issue. The Earth's ecosystems are in collapse, and the systems we've built to extract from it are no longer sustainable. We've lived under the illusion that we can continue to consume, to grow indefinitely. But now, the Earth is showing us the consequences. The fires, the storms, the droughts, they are not just disasters. They are signs. Signs that we've crossed the line. The audience shifted uneasily. Maya continued. We've proposed a new path forward, one where we no longer try to control nature, but instead partner with it. A path where we focus on ecological restoration, creating sanctuaries for the Earth's healing, and restoring the natural balance that has been disrupted by centuries of industrialization. A murmur ran through the crowd, a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The truth is, we no longer have the luxury of time. We've waited too long. The planet is in crisis, but we have the power to change, to heal, and to secure a future where humanity thrives, not at the expense of the Earth, but in harmony with it. This isn't a theory. This is a necessity. Maya's words were met with silence. Some faces looked uncertain, others were scornful. But as the final words left her lips, she saw something shift in the room. A slight change in posture, a softening of the eyes. The urgency of the situation was undeniable now. Elon stepped up next. Maya's right. We are not here to talk about half measures. We are here to talk about a fundamental change in the way we live, in the way we interact with the planet. We have the tools to make this happen, but we need the will. We need all of you to stand with us, not just for the sake of the planet, but for the future of humanity itself. He let his words hang in the air for a moment, then added, the world will not be saved by a few isolated innovations or promises from the powerful. It will be saved by the collective will of us all. The reaction to their presentation was not instantaneous. The following days were filled with heated debates, press conferences, and countless discussions. But something had changed. The world could no longer ignore the truth. Maya and Elon had pulled back the curtain on the illusion of control, and now the reality of their situation was undeniable. Small victories began to emerge. In Asia, some nations began testing local-scale ecological restoration projects, including forest regeneration initiatives and the protection of marine ecosystems. In Europe, renewable energy investment surged, and new coalitions of governments and businesses began exploring ways to integrate sustainability into their core operations. But even with the momentum shifting in their favor, the challenge was far from over. The opposition, though weakened, did not back down. Powerful corporations that depended on resource extraction and fossil fuels fought tooth and nail to prevent the transition. Their lobbying efforts intensified, and they funded disinformation campaigns to sow doubt about the new vision. But Maya and her team persisted. The media covered both sides, but the truth was out there now, and it was harder for the opposition to ignore. The effects of climate change were already devastating lives. The question was no longer whether they could continue as before. It was whether they could change fast enough to save what was left. One night, as Maya sat in her office, exhausted from a day of meetings and media appearances, she received a call from her daughter, Clara. It had been a long time since they'd had a real conversation, but now, with the world on the brink of change, the call felt more important than ever. "Mom," Clara said, her voice filled with a quiet strength, "are we going to make it?" Maya smiled softly, though she knew Clara couldn't see it. "We will. We're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. But what if we don't win?" Maya paused, considering the weight of her daughter's question. "We may not win today or tomorrow, Clara, but we're laying the groundwork for the future, and that's all we can do. The next generation, their future depends on the choices we make now. And if we succeed, it won't just be because of us. It'll be because everyone, together, chose a better way." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I believe in you, Mom." Maya closed her eyes, letting the simple words of her daughter wash over her. It wasn't just about saving the earth anymore. It was about leaving something worth inheriting for the future. The world had never been so divided, or so on the brink. The climate crisis had reached its tipping point, and Maya, along with Elon Musk and their team, stood at the center of a battle that could determine humanity's survival. The days of debate, resistance, and protest were behind them. Now, it was time for action. The clock was ticking, and Maya knew they had to make their final push. As the weeks passed following the Geneva summit, the world began to change, albeit slowly. The early signs were promising. Several governments had committed to transitioning their economies to a new, sustainable model, and some key corporations had publicly declared their intent to reduce their carbon footprint and support ecological restoration efforts. But this was only the beginning. However, the true test was yet to come. The resistance wasn't just going to roll over. Powerful industries still clung to their profits, and they had a vast amount of influence over the media, politics, and even public perception. And now, with the world's eyes fixed on the situation, Maya and Elon were about to face their biggest challenge yet, proving that the new model could work on a global scale. After months of negotiations, Maya and Elon had managed to rally the support of a few key nations, but it was still not enough. The US and several major powers had yet to come on board, and the world's financial system was reluctant to take the leap into uncharted waters. Then came the announcement that changed everything. A coalition of nations, led by the European Union and several Latin American countries, would be launching a pilot program for ecological restoration on a global scale. The program would focus on large-scale reforestation, the restoration of wetlands, and the protection of vital ecosystems that had been decimated by decades of industrial development. The plan was radical, but the stakes were too high to ignore. The pilot program would serve as a model, a blueprint for how the world could balance ecological regeneration with economic development. And it would start with the Amazon rainforest, one of the most vital ecosystems on Earth, and one that had been devastated by both climate change and human intervention. Maya and Elon knew that this was the moment. If they could succeed here, it would set a precedent for the rest of the world to follow. If they failed, the future would be grim. A team of scientists, environmentalists, and local leaders, many of whom had been fighting for years to protect the Amazon, joined forces with the coalition to begin the restoration work. Maya traveled to Brazil, where the humid air of the Amazon jungle felt like a reminder of everything at stake. The first few weeks were spent gathering data, assessing the damage, and building partnerships with indigenous groups who had long been the stewards of the land. Maya felt a deep sense of connection as she listened to the elders share their knowledge, passed down through generations, about the rhythms of the forest, the plants, the animals, and how the Earth's cycles were once in perfect harmony. "It's not just about planting trees," one elder told her. "It's about restoring balance. We live with the Earth, not against it." Maya was reminded once again that the journey was about more than just technological solutions or innovative approaches. It was about listening to the wisdom of those who had lived in harmony with the planet long before industrialization. The restoration efforts began slowly, with small successes. A patch of forest here, a creek there, all beginning to show signs of life again. But it was clear that the real challenge was yet to come. The world was watching, and the question on everyone's mind was simple. Could this vision scale? Could it work not just in one region but across the globe? While Maya was on the ground, Elon was back in the US facing the political fight of his life. With the global pilot program underway, a massive opposition campaign from corporations and right-wing political leaders launched a full-scale assault on the initiative. They labeled it an unrealistic utopia, an eco-socialist fantasy that would destroy jobs and collapse economies. The media outlets were divided, with some heralding the restoration project as humanity's last hope, while others mocked it as a waste of resources and a surrender to the forces of nature. In the face of this, Elon became a lightning rod for the controversy. He appeared on TV, in interviews, and at rallies, defending the project with every ounce of his energy. "The future we're heading toward is unsustainable. We cannot continue to prioritize short-term profits over long-term survival," he said during a televised debate. The entire idea of ecological restoration is not a radical proposition. It is a logical one. We cannot go on treating the Earth as though it's a machine to be exploited. It's a living system, and we need to learn how to live with it, not against it. But his words didn't always land with the public. As much as people admired his work with SpaceX and Tesla, many still saw him as a wealthy businessman who couldn't truly understand the needs of ordinary people struggling to make ends meet. In the days that followed, Maya and Elon faced an unexpected ally. A major natural disaster, a superstorm of unprecedented magnitude, hit the U.S. East Coast. The storm, fueled by warming oceans and atmospheric changes, wreaked havoc on entire communities, causing massive flooding, infrastructure failures, and widespread damage. As the damage from the storm began to sink in, the political landscape began to shift. People who had previously dismissed the need for urgent climate action began to ask questions. What if they had waited too long? What if the planet was already too far gone? Maya saw it firsthand when she spoke to a group of affected families who had lost their homes. They were tired of waiting for promises of recovery. They wanted something real, something that would ensure their children had a future. "This storm," one man said, "wasn't just a freak accident. It's what happens when we ignore the signs. We need to fix it, and we need to fix it now." Maya's heart sank, but she also knew that the moment was finally here. The entire world could now see the reality of climate change, not as a distant threat, but as something happening right now. With the pilot program in full swing and the global pressure mounting, the tipping point had finally arrived. The final vote would take place at the next G20 summit. It would decide whether or not the world would fully embrace the ecological restoration plan or continue down the path of exploitation. Maya stood at the precipice of history. All her work, all her sacrifices, had led to this moment. She knew that no matter the outcome, the movement for change would continue. It had already begun, and it would only grow stronger. The final votes came in. The decision was close, too close for comfort. But in the end, the world's leaders made their choice. The Ecological Restoration Initiative was approved. It was a bold, unprecedented decision, one that would reshape the future of the planet. And it was just the beginning. As the news broke across the world, Maya stood with Elon, watching the announcement unfold on the screen. It was a moment of profound relief, but she knew the real work was only just beginning. Maya turned to Elon, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "We've made the first step, but we have a long road ahead of us." Elon nodded, his face set with determination. "The road is just beginning, Maya, but now we have a plan. We have a chance, and that's all we need." As the sun rose over the horizon, signaling the start of a new day, Maya felt a deep sense of hope. The battle had been long, the stakes immense, but they had won the right to rewrite the future. And as she looked out at the dawn of a new era, she knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?